Do you think we'll actually have a Pizzaplex tale, like the tales of the Pizzaplex will be in the Pizzaplex?
I already know this one is.
Hooray! I'm sick of hearing about interior decorating and how handsome your husband is.
Okay. Under construction. This is unreal. Maya looked up and caught her reflection in the neon-bounded, mirror-tiled ceiling. Her eyes glowed red in the blazing light. For an instant, Maya shivered. The weird radiance in her eyes made her look like one of the undead from a zombie movie. Maya shook herself and quickly shifted her gaze. "Didn't I tell you?" Jackson shouted to be heard above the blaring 80s rock music that pulsed through around them. He brushed back his locks, took a huge bite of pizza, and looked from Maya to their strawberry blonde friend Noelle, who was gazing in awe at the bright yellow roller coaster track that wove in and out of luminescent climbing tubes and twined like snakes throughout the vast expanse beyond the dining area.
What?
There's a roller coaster apparently in the dining area of the Pizzaplex.
Oh, I wasn't even paying attention.
The Mega Pizzaplex. So, where is it, Steel Wolf? Where is the roller coaster?
Well, the coaster in like Monty's Gulf has like gator coasters, but like, and it looks like it's supposed to be part of like a bigger roller coaster, but like, it's just like Monty gators and you shoot things.
This is describing a yellow track, though. The Monty Gator one is green.
Maybe this is a different Mega Pizzaplex, or it's just like alternate universe theory that people say that the books pretty much are. Like an alternate scenario within the same confines of the lore, I guess.
Only it ends up creating new lore in the process. Anyway.
Like Fazgoo.
Noelle, her freckles standing out in the bright lights, reached for a soda. I have to admit, I thought Mega Pizzaplex was more hype than reality, but this is pretty cool. She sucked through a straw and bopped to the music's beat. Her ponytail swung back and forth. Pretty cool? Jackson dropped his half-eaten pizza slice. This is beyond cool! I can't wait to try VR booth. AR booth first, Jax, Maya said. She looked past a string of zipping go-karts and focused on the glass enclosure near the pizza-themed tilt-a-whirl. Every pod on the ride was shaped like a pizza topping. The large, bubble-like booth was the whole reason she'd wanted to come here tonight. Jackson rolled his eyes. Yeah, birthday girl, it's all about you. He flashed his signature mischievous grin and nudged Noelle, who gave Maya a goofy look. Maya struck an exaggerated glam pose and checked herself in the overhead mirror again. In the psychedelic lights flashing around them, her long black hair looked like an oil slick reflecting a kaleidoscope. Where their head tilted, her eyes no longer appeared red. They were their normal dark brown. She thought that between her dark skin and full features, her red dress, and the red rose tucked behind her ear, she looked like a little flamenco dancer. Maya returned her attention to her friends. She threw a balled-up napkin at them. Just because I got to 16 before you two losers is no reason to hate on me. They all laughed. Maya noticed that the bark of their laughter barely made a dent in the clamor around them. The music, loud as it was, competed with so many sounds that it was hard to distinguish them all. Maya could, however, make out the clatter of the roller coaster on its tracks, the hum of the go-karts, the tinny music and pings and blips of the arcade games, the buzzing sounds of laser tag, and overlaying it all, the sounds of happy screams and shouts and chatter. Maya's sister, Elena, would hate this place. Maya thought affectionately. Elena liked things quiet and peaceful. Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex was the exact opposite of quiet and peaceful. Elena would have hated the bright-colored chaos in the Pizzaplex, too. Whereas Maya loved vibrant jewel tones, her sister was all about white and gray and pastels. Maya looked down at her blood-red dress, then shifted her gaze to Jackson's bright orange shirt and Noelle's hot pink blouse. She glanced around. Even their bright-colored clothes were lost in the rainbow scape of the Pizzaplex. Maya and her friends were squeezed into the corner booths in the main dining area. The room was huge, but it's so stuffed with shiny red laminate top tables and chrome black chairs that it seemed smaller than it was, especially because every table was filled with voracious families, kids, and teens chowing down on pizza. Servers clad in red Freddy Fazbear uniform shirts with multicolored glow necklaces looped around their necks. Oh, so there's human employees this time. Could barely squeeze through the
Oh,
aisles as they rushed through the room serving pizza and drink. The swinging doors to the kitchen on the far side of the room were in their almost constant motion. Everywhere Maya looked, brilliant color and sparkling light beamed and blinked and shimmered. It seemed like everything in the Pizzaplex was spectacularly illuminated. LED lights were everywhere. They formed frames around
Moon
all the.
hates it. Moon hates it.
Wait, I wait until he's in one of these stores and that's just confirmed. He just hates all the LEDs.
He's like, I like the Pizzaplex when it's off.
Okay. LED lights were everywhere. They formed frames around all the tabletops and the flashy Freddy themed posters on the walls, and outlined the squares of the black and white checkerboard floor. Anything not wrapped and highlighted in LEDs was brightened by neon. Glowing archways formed the entrance to the dining area and to every other entertainment venue in the Pizzaplex. Alternating with the LED wrapped Freddy themed posters, neon art in the shape of Freddy's characters and pizza wedges blazed bright in reds, blues, greens, yellows, pinks, purples, and oranges. The mirrored ceiling caught all this light and refracted it, sending prisms of color everywhere. I'm just pausing for a moment because I don't remember there being a mirror on the ceiling.
No, there's not a mirror on the ceiling. This is probably like a different Mega Pizzaplex, or they're like embellishing it for the sake of narrative, or it's like just an alternate universe. Because I know that Scott has confirmed the books take place in like alternate universes, but like loose alternate universes, kind of like just like alternate scenarios, like, oh shit, or yeah, the Mega Pizzaplex has all this stuff. You just can't see it in the game because they'll be a nightmare to program. So
True. Outside the dining area, in the center of the Pizzaplex's domed roof, a backlit pizza motif, stained glass cupola in the center of the round mall ceiling beams streams of even more color down over the constant movement below. Maya thought that the effect was like a ballet of every tint she'd ever seen. The whole place seemed to flare and flicker in a constant motion of dazzling bright hues. You know, 16 is just a construct, right? Jackson shouted. Maya flinched when a speck of partially chewed pizza landed on her arm. She wrinkled her nose and brushed it off. She was used to Jackson spitting food across the table. He got so excited when he talked. When he got revved up about something, his words would run together and he'd forget to breathe. At the end of his all too frequent monologues, he'd be gasping for air. Person's age isn't real, Jackson continued. It's just a thought. Its existence depends on the subject's mind. Noel groaned. Oh, not again. Can't we leave the science in the science class?
this is realistic teenager dialogue. I'm so blown away by how realistic this teenager dialogue is. Sorry.
No, I'm surprised too, considering how the last story was. Maya patted Noah's arm in sympathy. However, the truth was Maya liked science, even when she didn't always understand it. Maya's main interest was biology, specifically botany. She loved growing things. Her mom said she was a born nurturer. But Jackson's musings about physics could be fun to listen to. Noel frowned at Jackson. Besides, age isn't a thought. It's an empirical fact. Maya's been alive for 16 years, no matter what her mind has to say about it. Jackson waved as if swatting away Noel's words. Maya stared at Jackson's big, dark hand. Jackson was tall and ebony-skinned. His mother was Jamaican, and his dad was from the deep south. He looked like he could be a star basketball player, but he hated sports. He was all about science and philosophy. He loved to ask unanswerable questions and try to answer them for hours on end. But what's alive? Jackson countered Noel's logic. He leaned forward, practically bouncing in his seat. Last night, I read an article about something called quantum immortality. It's a theory that says we never actually die. Noel looked up.
Like William Afton.
Dun dun dun.
I always come back.
Exactly. William Afton's just fine. He's just been studying quantum immortality for a really long time.
Noelle looked up at the mirrored ceiling as if it could help her. She sighed so loudly that not even the cacophony around them could silence her exasperation. Jackson ignored her. See, it's related to the many worlds theory. No matter which branch of reality you follow, your consciousness is experiencing existence. Each path leads to more existence. We can never experience anything but existence. So we go on and on. Well, you sure go on and on, Noelle said. Maya laughed. Noelle didn't even smile at her own joke. She crossed her arms and gave Jackson a hard look. People die all the time. The idea of immortality is totally whack. Are you telling me that when my uncle died, he didn't really die? Her voice rose at the end of the question. Noelle had been very close to her uncle, and she'd been shocked and devastated a couple of weeks before when he'd been killed in a car accident. Maya briefly touched Noelle's arm gently. Jackson, as typically oblivious to real emotion as usual, didn't notice that Noelle's upset. Well, quantum immortality only applies to the observer, so we actually can't know for sure if he's really dead. I mean, his consciousness could have branched out into a path that hasn't led to his death. No one has seen what the endgame would look like because the observer hasn't been there. What seems to be real to us might not be actually as real, so...
To be fair, you need a really high intellect to understand Rick and Morty. He's basically talking about like Schrodinger's cats, but it's just a theory, and you don't want to bring that up to like someone who's still grieving about a close family member. It's like, sure, many worlds theory. He's still alive in another world. Like, what the fuck, you?
Well, typical teenage boy.
Oh, well, whatever.
Maya, noticing Noelle's darkening expression, poked at Jackson. Are you done eating yet? I want to head over to the AR unit. Jackson glanced at his empty plate. He looked surprised to find it pizzaless. Noelle exhaled as if blowing out her upset. She cocked her head and pointed at Jackson. Pizza is a construct, you know, Noelle said. It only exists in your mind. Jackson grinned. Touché, girl. He offered Noelle his fist, and she, having apparently forgiven him and his insensitivity, bumped his fist with hers before she stood.
Whatever. I'd still be salty, man.
Teenagers. Star, star, star. Maya, Jackson, and Noelle linked arms as they left the VR booth and stepped into the throngs rushing from one entertainment venue to the next. Noelle squealed when she bumped into an employee wearing a Montgomery Gator costume. The phosphorescent green gator mascot patted Noelle on the head and moved on. Roxanne Wolf is a great character, Jackson gushed. Did you see? Maya tugged on his arm. Yeah, we saw. Hey, I let you drag me into a VR booth, and now it's my turn. Come on. The AR booth is this way. Jackson resisted her. Pointed out a line twisting toward the entrance towards the roller coaster. I want to go on Fast Freddy, Jackson said. It's supposed to have all the latest in roller coaster high tech. Jackson pulled a brochure from his pocket. It says here that each car has a touchpad and you can pick your own music. 5 genres to choose from. There are 28 LED lights programmed to change color throughout the ride. What the hell is what kind of roller coaster?
What?
It's a roller coaster where you get to pick what music you're listening to as you ride it with a touchpad.
Oh. Music Man.
Music Man as a roller coaster, okay.
Well, it has Freddy's name on it, so it's just like probably Freddy's face all over the thing. So
This is still like
it's still like Music Man's job. Like that's what he does. He makes his own music and own mixes, and they rotate like every day. Like he's constantly constructed new songs to avoid copyright.
yeah. Jackson pointed past the long lines, and see, it has a moving loading platform. It never comes to complete stop. He waved the brochure. And it has cameras, some on board and some on the track. Lasers trigger timing devices and computer record the images and create a video that's synced to whatever music you pick. The video is downloaded and sent to the kiosks. Jackson pointed at a small hut-like structure that was covered in strobing lights. It's all done in under a minute, so you can get the ultimate souvenir to go. Now that would be a great birthday present, don't you think, Maya? Jackson inhaled deeply to refill his lungs. Roller coaster cars careened past overhead. Maya felt a rush of air brush against her face. The screams of the coaster's riders hurt her ears. She shook her head. Later. AR booth first. Jackson hung his head. Then he bowed elaborately. Whatever thou dost sayest, milady. Maya laughed. Jackson's
Still have-
southern accent completely destroyed his attempt at Old English. Come on, she urged her friends. Noelle and Jackson followed Maya's lead. She tugged them away from the roller coaster entrance and on past the giant swings and bumper cars. At first, Maya hadn't been that into the idea of celebrating her birthday at Freddy's Pizzaplex. When Jackson had shown her the advertisements for the place, she thought they were so over the top that they were lame. She had to admit that Fazbear Entertainment knew how to make money. Before the Pizzaplex's big opening, the company sold thousands of mini hologram projectors at a... Okay, so the hologram thing on the stage is not just regulated to the stage. You can buy that.
Wait, that I was distracted. What was the thing?
Let me read the line for you so you can understand. Before the
Okay.
Pizzaplex's big opening, the company sold thousands of mini hologram projectors at super discounted prices. And the first thing the projector displayed was a holographic Glamrock Freddy doing his spiel. Hey kids, do you want pizza? Well, Fazbear Entertainment has spared no expense developing the world's most extreme family fun center, Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex. At 3 stories tall, it's the flashiest, raddest, rockiest, safest pizzeria the universe has ever seen. Of course, Freddy and the band are excited to meet you. Utilizing the latest in animatronic technology, you can actually party with the stars themselves. So, on your next birthday, let Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex make you a superstar. It's a perfect place to celebrate your sweet 16, Jackson had said. Maya had resisted Jackson's pitch even when he'd listed all the entertainment possibilities. Of course, they have a stage for the animatronics performances, and they have an arcade and laser tag, he told her, but they also have a theater, giant swings and slides and climbing tubes and rides, including a dope roller coaster and bumper cars, and state-of-the-art electric-powered go-karts and a sweet carousel. Oh, and carnival games. Maybe they can win you a Freddy plushie. He's still my beating heart, Maya had replied. When Maya had kept shaking her head, Jackson had talked even faster. They also have a sick VR booths and roleplay venues. Oh, and they have this AR unit, especially for birthdays. It's their premier attraction because Freddy's always been putting emphasis. I cannot speak as fast as he's probably talking, so I'm going to have to speak normally. And Maya had kept shaking her head. Jackson had talked even faster. They also have sick VR booths and roleplay venues. Oh, and they have this AR unit, especially for birthdays. It's their premier attraction because Freddy's has always put an emphasis on celebrating birthdays. I know what VR is, but what's AR? Maya had asked, despite herself. Jackson's eyes had lit up. He'd love explaining things. AR stands for augmented reality. It's a way of crossing the real world with the virtual world. Basically, objects in the real world are enhanced by computer-generated perceptions. The one at the Pizzaplex is supposed to be a really awesome one. It uses all sorts of sensory modulators: visual, auditory, somatosensory, olfactory, and even haptic. Haptic? I had a question. Haptic means to grab onto something. Basically, the AR unit at the Pizzaplex lets you reach out and grasp the things that aren't even really there. AR basically plays reality. The tech can be both constructive and deconstructive, meaning that it can add things into the physical world or subtract things, whereas VR completely replaces reality with a simulated one. AR is a mix of the real and the virtual. The AR unit at the Pizzaplex is called The World Celebrates You. It gives you the illusion that everyone in the Pizzaplex is taking part in celebrating you. Basically, it's like having a massive birthday shindig without all the money and trouble. It's the ultimate way to spend a birthday. This was what convinced Maya to go for Jackson's idea. Even though she knew her family and all her friends would celebrate her birthday, she also knew it wasn't going to be a huge deal. Family didn't have money for a shindig like she wanted. It sounded pretty neat to have the whole Pizzaplex full of people partying with Maya on her birthday. So here they were, and she wanted to get her party started. Maya and her friends had been at the Pizzaplex for a few hours already. They'd wandered at first, then they'd eaten, at Jackson's insistence. And then they'd gone to the VR area, again, at Jackson's insistence. During this time, Maya had gotten a pretty good sense of the place. Pizzaplex
I just want to say, the fact that you can grasp things in their AR, that's like pretty cool. That's like a high advance because our AR technology isn't really there yet. They have AR experiences at Disney World rides, and I guess Pokemon Go can be considered AR.
Yeah, it's technically classified as AR because it is adding objects to the real world.
Right. So the fact this AR isn't just like virtual tokens or virtual things that you can get. You can actually like feel things that aren't there. That's like insane to me.
Yeah, so the fact that they have this makes it completely believable that they have mastered the technology to make Sun and Moon's pants like change patterns and all that.
You're right. Like this is a universe where science is basically like magic and it can do anything.
The Pizzaplex was set up in a circle. In the center of the circle, ramps led down to a backlit enclosure created for the littlest kids. Cave-like area was filled with glowing climbing bars, slides, and foam building blocks. All this was set up around a glitter ball pit, padded benches for watchful parents surrounded the area. Yeah, this sounds like a completely different Pizzaplex than the one that we saw in the game. Above the
Yeah.
subterranean play area, a grandiose two-story theater rotunded erupted like a fairy tale castle under the stained glass cupola. The rest of the entertainment venues and shops, of course, stores in the Pizzaplex carried Freddy's themed clothing, costumes, souvenirs, and toys. Bring the Pizzaplex. Between these venues and the theater, a go-kart track crisscrossed over and under the walkways that led from one of the part of the plex to the other. Several VR booths were spaced along the walkway, and above everything, the roller coaster tracks intertwined with the climbing tubes. Two systems looked like serpentine modern art installation, or a hovering serpent waiting to devour all the people bustling about beneath it. Maya dragged her friends to the crowd, yanking on Jackson as he tried to veer toward the role-play area. Her gaze was on the prize, the AR unit. It was only a few yards away, and it was closed? Maya exclaimed. Maya stopped so abruptly that Jackson ran into her. Noelle plowed into Jackson. The two grunted and glared at Maya. Then they looked in the direction of her gaze. The AR unit looked like a giant snow globe, only without the snow. Its base was bright red, and inside the clear, thick glass, a throne-like gold unupholstered chair sat in the center of the cleared bubble. A flashing neon sign blinked above the spherical glass. The world celebrates you. Neon stars and streamers surrounded the words. Unfortunately, another sign was attached to bright yellow tape, similar to crime scene tape, stretching across the entrance to the AR unit. The sign read, "Closed. Under construction." Under construction? Maya snapped. How can they make a big deal about a premiere attraction and not even finish it before they open? That's false advertising. Maya turned to scowl at Jackson. You said I'd get my big party. Jackson's usually animated expression was slack as he looked at the closed AR unit. His shoulders slumped. I'm sorry, Maya. I didn't know. That's not his fault. Noelle hugged Maya. Come on, it's not that big a deal, is it? You've got us. And she whipped her arm outward to indicate all the commotion in the Pizzaplex. It's not like there's nothing to do. Maya blinked away tears that had come out of nowhere. She felt like a spoiled brat for being so upset, and she didn't want to cry in front of her friends. She was so disappointed. She really looked forward to using the AR. Maya glowered at the closed sign. Then she set her jaw and took a deep breath. She looked around. No one was paying any attention to her and her friends. She made up her mind. Oh, you stupid idiot. She rushed forward and ducked underneath the yellow tape. Noelle gasped.
Oh.
Maya, you can't go in there! Maya stepped over the threshold and looked back at Noelle and Jackson. Looks like I can. Are you coming? Noelle shook her head. She glanced over her shoulder and looked up. Maya followed Noelle's gaze. A huge, mirrored, covered enclosure loomed over the large area marked employees only. Space looked big enough to house all the behind-the-scenes offices and machinery that must have gone into operating something as elaborate as the Pizzaplex. It was clear the mirrors were two-way, and the elevated enclosure was where security kept an eye on the Pizzaplex. Obviously aided by the dozens of CCTV cameras Maya had noticed everywhere she and her friends had been. Maya was sure a bunch of self-important, low-paid employees were playing Big Brother up there. Yeah, they could be watching. But she didn't care. They can come and drag me out if they want, Maya said. I'm going in. Come with me, or don't. Noelle and Jackson exchanged a look. Jackson shrugged. What's the worst they can do? Throw us out? He looked
Well,
longingly.
true, but like, I'm like, if the AR thing is like busted, I wouldn't trust to like go in there, especially when it's established that you can like feel things that aren't really there. They're gonna start seeing some weird ass shit.
And somebody's gonna die. And not fun.
Someone's gonna die in the murder bots.
No, the
In
murder globe, because it's a snow globe, remember?
Yeah, I meant to say globe, but like murder bots.
The Pizzaplex is the murder box.
Yeah, the Pizzaplex is the murder bots. It's just a big murder bots.
He looked longingly at the roller coaster, then shrugged again. We can always go home and work on our science projects. Noelle blew a raspberry. As if. Maya turned her back on her friends and entered the AR booth. She only got a few feet into it before she heard Jackson and Noelle rush in behind her. This is cool! Jackson circled the chair, then bent over and examined it. There's a processor under here. He gestured at the glass that surrounded them. The glass will be the display that adds to what you can see through the dome now. He reached down and picked up a woven-looking headband that had been lying, almost hidden, on the chair's seat. This looks like a sensory device. See? He held up the headband and indicated the latest work of nodes on the inside of it. I think this will augment your senses to make your experiences feel real in every way. I think the way it works is... Whatever, Maya said. She started to the chair and grabbed the headband. If security had seen them enter the AR booth, she didn't have much time. She took a seat. Maya slipped on the headband. She looked around. Nothing had changed. How do you turn it on? I asked. Jackson bent down. He felt at something. Suddenly the glass walls of the AR booth disappeared. Maya could see directly out to the huge expanse of the Pizzaplex, and it was filled with birthday balloons, streamers, and piles of birthday presents. It was also filled with hundreds of people blowing noisemakers and cheering. It was as if everyone in the Pizzaplex had stopped to focus on Maya. All the adults and kids on the walkways were turned to look at her. All the people in the dining room were gazing her way, their glasses raised. Their eyes were still in motion. All the people in them were craning their necks to see Maya as they zipped past or spun around. Patrons and employees alike were smiling towards Maya, as if she was the most important person on the planet. Surprise! They all shouted in unison. Maya felt a thrill of importance as she gazed out at the crowd. Then she teared up again when she spotted her family. They were all there. Her parents and Arlena, her Aunt Sophia and Uncle Raphael, her Aunt Luciana and Uncle Peter. She saw all her cousins, even her favorite, little Axel. She saw her neighbors. Davis twins were jumping up and down and waving at Maya. And the Thompsons' 3 kids held a big happy birthday banner. Even old Mr. and Mrs. Lambert, the grumpy couple who lived across the street from Maya's home, were in the crowd. Miss Lambert held up a plate of her award-winning coffee cake, grand prize winner at the county fair for 20 years straight, dear. Maya's love of that coffee cake was what had endeared her to the otherwise curmudgeonly couple. Maya saw her favorite teacher, Miss Carpenter, and her minister, Pastor Ben. She saw all the members of her choir and her classmates from school. Everyone was wearing party hats, and everyone looked like Maya's birthday was the happiest day of their lives. As Maya strained to pick out all the people she knew, the crowd parted, and Glamrock Chica, her bright pink dress shining under the bright lights, skipped into view, heading toward Maya. She pushed a big cart. The cart held a massive 6-tiered birthday cake frosted in creamy icing and decorated with red candy roses, Maya's favorite flower. 16 huge candles flickered atop the cake. Maya realized she was smiling so widely that her cheeks were starting to hurt, but she smiled even wider when Freddie's band started a boisterous rock version of Happy Birthday, and everyone started singing along. Maya reached out and grabbed Jackson and Noelle's hands. See? It wasn't all flying after all. Happy birthday, Maya. Noelle hugged Maya, then stepped back so Jackson could follow suit. Maya smiled at the cherry scent of Noelle's shampoo and the smell of Jackson's pizza breath. She understood that the scene in front of her wasn't real. The Pizzaplex couldn't have suddenly transformed into the birthday party of her dreams. All the people she knew didn't just beam in magically, and the ones she didn't know, of course, weren't interrupting their fun to make such a big deal of a total stranger. But it felt real, and the familiar smells of her friends anchored her to what was really real.
Like, did that booth like scan her memory for all like her friends and family in like a matter of seconds and just projected them all there? Like,
Yeah, that's pretty sus.
no, that is really scary.
Sus and terrifying, and I don't understand why she's not more concerned.
No, I would be like concerned. I go into like the witness protection program after this because what the fuck?
The combination of real and not real was heady. It spun Maya out of herself and into the fantasy of frolic and laughter. At first, it felt like Maya was just watching the celebration around her, but as it continued, she was no longer an observer. She was drawn into the party, just as she would have been if it was real. After Freddie's band finished the happy birthday, everyone started chanting, "Make a wish! Make a wish!" Maya grinned and imagined having this moment last forever. Then she blew out the candles. Their smoke spiraled upward as everyone cheered. Maya laughed in delight. Freddie's band started playing one of Maya's favorite rock songs. Jackson grabbed Maya's hand, and he spun her into the crowd, which backed up and formed a circle around the makeshift dance floor in the center of the walkway.
So
Jackson.
they can play copyrighted songs. Like I doubt that her favorite rock song is like a song that's public domain from like 85 years ago.
I think that's just like the part of the AR experience
And I guess since like they're not technically playing it and it's all
in her
AR, I
head.
think that yeah, because I think that Maya's the only one really seeing this. And like she's only been in there for like a few seconds, and just because of how advanced their AR is, like it just feels like you're there, basically. Like the technology got there. The technology is there in this universe. Like you feel like you are there. Like it's not just virtual coins and shit anymore.
Hmm. Jackson and Maya weren't a couple. She thought of him as more of a brother than a friend, but the two of them had always danced well together. Jackson had some serious moves, and Maya was naturally graceful. As they started bopping to the staccato beat of the song, they slid into a series of intricate steps that they'd never practiced but had to have looked choreographed to their audience. Maya felt like a dancing queen as Jackson whirled her and dipped her and even flipped her over his shoulder. What the hell? When the song
Wait, what?
I'm just apparently these 16-year-olds know how to do like professional dancing.
I didn't learn how to swing dance until I was in college. What the heck?
Apparently they're very talented dancers at 16
Hmm.
as well as being a huge science buff. When the song
Also, I'm just gonna say that her favorite song was Dancing Queen, so I can just imagine the Claremont playing Dancing Queen.
and ironically she said she felt like a dancing queen.
Yeah, no, that's why I said.
When the song ended, the crowd went wild and more couples filled the open space as a new song began. They danced and danced and danced. I didn't know how much time passed when Jackson, sweaty and grinning like a maniac, led her through the crowd to the cake. There, Glamrock Chica handed Maya a gleaming knife, which might have looked scary in any other setting, and Maya cut into the second tier of her gorgeous cake. She got the first piece, and she nearly fainted in bliss when her teeth sank into the moist pistachio and buttercream flavored confection, her favorite
Oh my god.
flavors. Ew. Several.
No! Yay!
What? Pist-
I'm saying yay.
pistachio?
Yeah! Pistachio good.
But you can't have peanuts!
I can have pistachio. Pistachio isn't peanuts. I don't even think pistachio is a tree nut. Hang on. This is important. Is pistachio a tree nut? Oh, yeah, okay. Pistachio is a tree nut. Well, like I can have pistachio and it doesn't agitate my allergies, okay?
Several employees rushed out to help hand out cake. They all hugged or high fived Maya as they passed her. She didn't know any of them, but they all acted like they had been longtime friends. I would be so creeped out by that.
Like now I'm starting to wonder if like I know it's only like a few pages into the story, but I'm starting to wonder if it went off like the deep end immediately and she's already outside of the AR booth and employees are like dragging her home with her friends, but she thinks that the employees are her friends and they're like partying with her. Like
We'll
that's
have
the vibe I'm getting right now.
we'll have to see. The music was still blasting, and the crowd was still laughing and dancing and chattering. Maya felt a little like a bouncing beach ball as she was passed from one group of revelers to the next. She was hugged over and over. She received kisses and pats and love yous from all her relatives. Her favorite kiss was from sweet little Axel. The lip smack was wet and sticky from the smear of frosting on his mouth. Time continued to expand and compress in an odd and disorienting way as Maya suddenly found herself seated near the massive pile of brightly wrapped presents. Her mom, after whispering that Maya's special present from her grandparents would come later as usual, began handing Maya the presents, and she opened them one by one. Most of the presents were wrapped in floral themed paper. Everyone knew how much she loved flowers. All the gifts inside the festive packages were things she loved. She received vibrantly colored clothes, stacks of romance novels, and books on gardening, sheet music and CDs of her favorite music, makeup and jewelry, stuffed teddy bears, posters, and prints of flowers and cute kittens, scented lotions and soaps and candles, portable keyboard, a new guitar, and finally a new laptop and a camera. These were to help her photograph and catalog the flowers she grew, her mom said. Gift openings seemed endless. Maya actually started feeling guilty. She was sure that watching her open presents had to be boring for everyone else. Whenever she looked up at the people surrounding her, though, they appeared to be enjoying themselves. They were totally attentive. I couldn't imagine a more perfect birthday celebration. She wanted it to last forever.
But she like knows it's not real, right? Like she still knows that she's in the AR booth, right? Like you're not actually getting these presents. Like,
Well, we'll just see. Star, star, star. Maya, Jackson, and Noelle ducked under the tape and looked out at the boisterous group of kids and families enjoying the Pizzaplex. I can't believe this looked like my birthday party a few seconds ago, Maya said. I told you it'd be great, Jackson beamed, as if he designed the AR unit himself. Maya leaned into him. Yes, you did, and you were right. I can't believe we didn't get thrown out of here, Noelle said, looking up at the security booth. Maya followed Noelle's gaze. She frowned. Noelle had a point. Surely they had cameras in the AR unit. Someone must have seen them. Maya shrugged. Whatever. I'm just glad I got my big party. Now can we go on the roller coaster? Jackson asked. Maya laughed. Yes, let's go on the roller coaster. The friends linked arms again, and they headed for the roller coaster line. As they made their way through the crush of happy people, Maya felt like she was more floating than walking. Her virtual, or augmented, or whatever, birthday party was the best birthday celebration she'd ever had. It wasn't that she didn't appreciate the birthday picnics her family usually organized for her, the potluck affairs that were always held in their yard and always included a basic sheet cake and a cheap piñata, but she'd wanted the kind of party she just had in the AR unit. Now she'd had one. She was a happy girl. I admit that this coaster is flashy looking, Noelle said as they queued up for the ride, but I don't see how a 3-story roller coaster can be much fun. I won't get high enough. She gazed up at the roller coaster's apex. It's not the height that makes it thrilling, Jackson said. It's the speed and the loop-de-loops and the other things. What other things? Maya asked. You'll see, Jackson said in an ominous tone. Mwahaha. Noelle rolled her
also
eyes.
like a 3-story roller coaster is like pretty average. It would be like the Slinky roller coaster at like Disney World. Like it's like they call it a baby roller coaster, but it's pretty average unless you want one that goes like really, really high.
Yeah, no, my stomach would not be able to handle that.
Oh, I love the feeling of like vertigo. Like I've never been scared of heights. I'm the kind of person who like climbs up a tall hill and leans all the way over the railing, and my parents need to pull me back.
Yeah, I don't like the sensation of falling. I get it
Yeah.
sometimes when I'm like playing a video game and I jump from a high height if I'm looking straight down. It's like so weird.
Yeah, no, I'm weird. I'm like the opposite. I like love the feeling of like vertigo and stuff. It's just the aftermath of roller coasters I don't really like. It's like, but like going on one, yeah.
Noelle rolled her eyes. It can't be that scary. But it was. Maya and her friends didn't have to wait long before they were the next ones in line for one of the yellow and red striped cars coming toward the continually moving loading area. The cars were big enough for 3 people if they didn't mind a tight fit. So Maya and Noelle followed Jackson into one of the cars. They pulled the safety bars tightly over their chests as instructed. As soon as the bars clicked into place, the car disappeared into the dark tunnel. Rock and roll, right? Jackson shouted as he reached for the touchpad in front of them. The pad was the only thing lit up in the darkness. Always! Noelle yelled. Throbbing bass notes. That's the wrong type of bass. Ushered in a screeching guitar riff, and the car picked up speed. As it accelerated into the turn, a giant pirate fox, "Hey, Foxy!" suddenly loomed in front of them. Raising a gleaming hook, the fox swiped the sharp steel at their heads just as the car jerked to the left. Maya and Noelle screamed. Jackson whooped. The car swung around in a tight loop, then shot upward and flipped over, whipping them, upside down, into another U-turn before suddenly flipping them back over and climbing. From that point on, the ride was a blur for Maya. Every few seconds, it seemed like another Freddy's character, lit up blindingly and larger than life, appeared out of nowhere and scared them silly. After the third jump scare of sharp animatronic teeth speeding toward her, Maya closed her eyes. From that point, the ride was mayhem of motion and sound and light flashes behind her eyelids. Thankfully, it was over seemingly as fast as it started. When the car slowed, the safety bars released, and Jackson jumped out of the car. Noelle clambered after him. Maya brought up the rear, staggering. She was sure the ride had stolen some of her bones. Her legs felt like jellyfish tentacles. Wasn't that the boss? That, that's not... you don't
The,
say the boss. It's just boss. Wasn't that boss?
wasn't that wait, what? That's an expression?
No, like you can say something is boss, but you don't
You
say
can?
yeah, that was boss
I
as in like boss level.
I've never heard that was boss in my life.
But that was the boss.
I don't know, like, I like that was the boss. Maybe I'm showing my age. Maybe the authors are showing their age to the kids.
Jackson shouted as he grabbed Maya's and Noah's hands. Let's go get our videos. He pulled them toward the little kiosk near the coaster's exit area. A couple minutes later, they had their custom videos. Maya wasn't sure she'd ever look at hers. She didn't need to watch a closed-eye version of herself being terrified at 100 miles per hour, or however fast they'd been going. Jackson had kept yelling out the speeds during the ride, but Maya had ignored him. Now what? Jackson asked. Maya shook her head. Your choice, Jax. She came here tonight for the AR birthday party, and she'd gotten that. She didn't really care what they did now.
I think that this roller coaster ride is referencing the Fotsy Pirate Shoot It minigame from Help Wanted.
Yeah.
Just because, like, Help Wanted and Security Breach are connected in that way.
Mm-hmm. Star, star, star. It was after 10 when Maya pushed open the back door to her family's small, bright kitchen. She hung her keys on the peg by the turquoise retro fridge. Her parents, as she'd expect them to be, were sitting at the multicolored tile top table, sipping hot chocolate and playing a game of cards. It was their sometimes pre-bedtime routine, and Maya suspected it was a good excuse for them to wait up for their teenage daughter to get home. Wow, she was out past 10. What a rebel.
I
Maya's
wasn't allowed to go anywhere past 10.
Neither was I until I was like in my 20s. Maya's mom drew a card and smiled up at Maya. Have fun, sweetie? Maya grinned. It was great, even better than Jackson said it would be. You won't believe everything they have there. Maya stopped. She'd been about to tell them about the AR unit, but to do that, she'd have to tell them about the dream party with everything she'd ever wanted in a birthday party. She didn't want them to think she didn't appreciate the parties they had for her. Did you go on the roller coaster? Maya's dad asked. I read about that. I bet it's pretty cool. Maya laughed. You sound like Jackson. You couldn't stop talking about it. Maya held out the videotape she got at the kiosk. Here's a video of our ride. You can see me screaming and closing my eyes as tight as I could get them closed. Maya's mother shook her head. Oh, that sounds like fun. Her words were dripping in sarcasm. Maya went to her mom and gave her a hug. Laying her cheek against the top of her mom's head, she closed her eyes to soak in the smooth softness of her mom's short black curls, peppered with gray. Her mom smelled like jasmine, as always. Maya straightened, then stepped around the table and bent over to give her dad a quick hug. The top of his head wasn't soft. He kept his thinning hair in a buzz cut, which felt like a big burr against Maya's chin. But she didn't care. She loved her dad, and the way he always smelled like ink and toner. I have a feeling that she is still in the AR unit.
Mm, She might be, like, unless, like, she's going straight to bed, because I only hug my parents if we're parting ways after a visit,
No,
or,
no,
like,
I'm only
I'm going to bed.
saying this because she's commenting on their scents the same way she'd commented on her friend's scents inside the AR booth.
Huh. Okay, yeah, true.
This is just speculation, we'll see. Maya let go of her dad and turned to the gas stove. Like the fridge, it too was turquoise in style to look like a holdover from the 50s. She knew there'd be enough hot chocolate for her left in the pan. She poured it into a mug and joined her parents at the table. She took a sip of the rich chocolate. Deal me in next round? Absolutely, her dad said. Maya smiled as she watched her parents finish out their hand. For the thousandth time, she thought about how lucky she was to have such great parents. Her mom, dark and petite and pretty, was a grade school teacher, but she always had plenty of time to take care of her family. Maya's dad, his plain face creased with smile lines around his eyes and mouth, ran an office supply and print shop. He worked long hours, but he somehow always made Maya and Elna feel like they were the center of his world. spent time with them every day. As her parents finished their hand and her dad dealt out the cards for a new hand, Maya thought again about the AR unit party. She wasn't sure why it had been so important to have that experience of being the focus of everyone's attention. It wasn't like she was neglected. Maybe it was that her parents were so laid back that nothing ever felt like a huge deal. Sometimes Maya wanted things to be exciting instead of just happy. Maya picked up her cards. Now, though, breathing in the aroma of the chocolate in the mug in front of her and gazing at her parents' content faces, she was okay with happy. After a half hour or so of cards, Maya kissed her parents, said goodnight, and headed down the narrow hallway to the bathroom. She took her time in the hall, pausing to gaze at the dozens of framed family photos that covered the walls. Of course, the photos had been there for years, but the party had reminded Maya of all the people who loved her. She wanted to linger over their images for a few seconds before brushing her teeth. Maya finally got to her room. She didn't even bother to change into pajamas. She was suddenly wiped out. She just fell back onto her twin bed. She hit the mattress with such a big whomp that the bed frame scooted across the floor. Elena sat up in the other twin bed stuffed into the small room. Woo! In the muted yellow glow of the domed nightlight, Maya could see Elena's face was crumpled, and her curly black hair was in a tangle. Sorry, El, Maya said. It's just me. What time is it? Elena rubbed her big brown eyes, ones that looked just like Maya's. Late, Maya hopped off her bed and moved to Elena's bed. Scoot over. Elena grumbled, but she scooted. Maya cuddled up next to her sister and wrapped her in a hug. Maya savored the warmth of her sister's flannel-clad shoulders as she looked around their small bedroom, containing just the two beds and one nightstand, along with the one dresser and a table that served as a desk for both of them. The room had been Maya and Elena's domain for their whole lives. Maya remembered when the room had been painted pink, and the bedspreads had been white and frilly. Now half the room was painted Maya's favorite color, red, and half the room was painted gray. Maya's bedspread had rose design, Elena's was pale blue. Maya thought about all the presents she'd received at her big birthday party. She smiled. It was a good thing they hadn't been real. How would she have fit them all into this tiny room? Too bad the AR couldn't have conjured up a big house for her and her family. That was just silly. Maya loved this compact house. It was filled with happy memories. How could a new big house compete with that? What's going on? Elena asked. Maya laughed. It's my birthday, that's what. Elena squinted at the glowing blue numbers in their clock radio, which sat on their shared nightstand. Not for another 42 minutes and 15 seconds. Maya laughed again and squeezed her precise sister. Close enough. Besides, I already had my big party. Elena frowned. But I wasn't there. Yes, you were. Everyone was. It was the best party ever. Elena wrinkled her broad nose and made a face at Maya. She wriggled free of Maya's embrace. You're weird. You're weird. Elena rolled her eyes and flopped back onto the bed. Get out of my bed. I need my brain sleep. Maya smiled. Maya's mother was always telling the girls they needed their beauty sleep. But cerebral and not concerned with beauty, Elena took issue with that. She said she got brain sleep that helped her be smarter. Whereas Maya had gotten looks, Elena had gotten brains. And it might have been shorter and plainer than Maya. What she lacked in beauty, she made up for in smarts and confidence. Elena was a year behind Maya in age. She was years ahead of Maya in education and accomplishments. Maya was content to be a teenager. Elena was in a hurry to be an adult. She was a math whiz. In the following year, she was going to be enrolled in the local college. Maya wasn't envious at all about Elena's brilliance. In fact, Maya was super proud of Elena. Maya was content to be Maya, and she celebrated Elena's Elena-ness. It had been, however, incredibly nice to be the center of attention at her Pizzaplex birthday party. Maya didn't usually get to shine like that. It was an experience she was never going to forget. Next day, Maya's family threw the usual birthday party on the porch and grass in front of their house. Because the home's front yard was small, the party always spilled into the street and into the neighboring yards. Even though decorations were minimal, the giant oaks and weeping willows that sheltered the small houses in the neighborhood provided all the beauty Maya could have asked for. Maya's birthday was in May, apparently inspiration for her name, and it was always warm out at this time of year. As usual, iridescent hummingbirds and fluttering yellow monarch butterflies were flitting around in the flower beds at the base of the porch rails in front of Maya's house. They were better than balloons. This year, besides the customary simple happy birthday banner strung across the front of the house, The decor also included a Sweet 16 sign Maya's youngest cousins had made. The big cardboard sign was lettered with crayons and decorated with glitter and childlike drawings of red roses. The pinata was the usual vaguely shaped horse form. Maya didn't even like horses. And the cake was a big flat chocolate one with the slanted "Happy Birthday, Maya" written in store-bought tubed icing. The celebration couldn't have been more different than the one at the Pizzaplex. The only similarity was the presence of all Maya's family and friends, and Miss Lambert's offering of her award-winning coffee cake. The cake was actually welcome. Maya preferred the apple and crumb-topped cake to the chocolate one her family always had for her. "Thanks for coming, Mr. and Mrs. Lambert," Maya said when she went to sit with them. They had brought their own folding chairs and set themselves up under the gnarly oak of the street. They watched the party as if it was war instead of a celebration, deep frowns etched between their brows. Mr. Lambert said predictably. "I hope you enjoyed my award-winning coffee cake," Miss Lambert said. "It was delicious as always," Maya told her. She wanted to hug the old lady, but Miss Lambert's erect posture and stiff shoulders were as good as a keep-away sign. Maya left the Lamberts and headed back towards the porch. She crossed the yard. She rubbed her temples. This morning, when she'd gone up, her forehead had hurt, right where a couple of the AR headband nodes had touched her skin. She figured the headband had just irritated her skin, but the pain felt more like a mild headache now. "Hey, birthday girl!" Noah called out. Maya forgot about her headache and joined her friends. After the birthday cake had been cut, Maya and the other kids and teens took turns swatting the piñata. As always, the Davis twins, tow-headed Wesley and Wendy, swinging in unison, were the ones who cracked the papier-mâché open. Then they fought each other for first grab at the candy. Everyone else hung back. Tall and gangly 13-year-olds' competitions were infamous. It was best not to get in their way. Although this party did have a small table of gifts, the present opening wasn't the focal point of the affair. Maya's mom always emphasized that gifts were optional. Presents is much more important than presents, her invitations always said. She knew the people in Maya's neighborhood and our school weren't well off. The custom at Maya's family's parties was for the birthday celebrant to open a present here and there, if the person giving the gift wanted to see it opened. As usual, the most eager of us were the Thompson kids. Donnie, 10, Parker, 6, and Aurora, 5, were Maya's 3 favorite kids, after her cousins, of course. She was their frequent babysitter because their parents, still pretty young because they'd married when they were 18, and had Donnie a few months later, hadn't yet grown out of their need to party. They went clubbing regularly. They were great parents, though. Miss Thompson was an awesome baker. Maya loved lingering in the Thompsons' pristine kitchen after the couple got back from their dates. "Snickerdoodle time," Mr. Thompson would say, and Maya and the Thompsons would each eat one of the big, soft cookies while Mr. Thompson told jokes. His favorite jokes were typical dad humor. "Knock, knock," Mr. Thompson had said a few nights before. Maya had answered dutifully. "Who's there?" "Alpaca." "Alpaca who?" "Alpaca the luggage, alpaca the car." Maya and Miss Thompson had groaned in unison. Mr. Thompson always managed to make Maya laugh several times as he walked her home. The cookies and the jokes were great, but the couple paid Maya well, too. For the last 3 years, since they moved in a few houses down from Maya's home, Thompson's kids had made Maya birthday presents. The first year, they gave her bookmarks made from tongue depressors. Miss Thompson was a nurse. And crayon and glitter glue decorated brown lunch bags that looked like they'd already been used. Last year, she'd gotten a necklace made out of pipe cleaners. This year, the kids had gone all out. They made her a scrapbook constructed from more brown lunch bags and filled with glued-on buttons, string, and photos of the 3 kids. "This is wonderful," Micah opened her present. "I picked out the buttons!" Pug-nosed Laura announced. She beamed with pride, and her brothers snorted. "Well, you did a great job. I appreciate all the effort you put into it," Maya told them. The kids accepted her thank you hugs and scampered off to see if Wesley and Wendy had left any candy behind. Maya appreciated everything about her party, and she had a great time playing with her cousins, especially little Axel, Aunt Sophia, and Uncle Peter's youngest. Axel was a pudgy-faced 4-year-old with dark, dark eyes and a grin that never disappeared. Maya loved babysitting him. He was obsessed with patty cake, and they played it so long that Maya's palms were sore when Axel finally got drowsy enough to curl up in her lap and go to sleep. But Aunt Sophia, her long braids looped on top of her head in an intricate knot, picked up her youngest son. She kissed Maya on the forehead. I'm not gonna even attempt that. It's happy birthday in Spanish. It's Feliz años, mi sobrina. I just cut off the first half of that because Azorian slang. We don't say it that way. Thanks, Aunt Sophia. My when Sophia raised an eyebrow. I mean, gracias, tia Sophia. Maya's grandparents had come to the U.S. before they had their children, Sophia, Luciana, and Maya's mother, Violetta. They learned English right away, and they made sure their 3 girls were bilingual from the start. The same was true of their grandchildren. Between them, Maya's mother and aunts had given Maya's maternal grandparents 12 grandchildren. Sophia and Peter were responsible for 6 of those. Luciana and Raphael had 4 kids. Maya's brought up the rear with her 2 girls. Recently, Sophia had become obsessed with celebrating the family's Puerto Rican heritage. She was taking Spanish lessons. She was insistent that Maya learn too. Maya humored her with the occasional phrase. Thankfully, Maya's dad's parents weren't as interested in their ancestors' roots. Mostly, we're Irish, but I think we have some Czech, some Greek, and some Welsh in us, Maya's father had told her when she asked about it. She was glad no one was obsessed with that heritage. She couldn't even imagine trying to learn Gaelic or even more difficult Czechoslovakian. She was also glad that her father was an only child. Not that she didn't love her cousins. She did. Family get-togethers were chaotic enough without even more little kids running around. Aunts and uncles and cousins left. Maya and her parents settled in with Maya's grandparents around a small bonfire in the backyard. It was the family's tradition that the grandparents gave their grandchild a special birthday present after the party was over. Maya always loved this part, her birthday, just as she loved her grandparents. Maya's 2 sets of grandparents couldn't have been more different. Her mother's parents were dark-skinned, short, and round, their faces lined from years of smiling, their hands calloused from years of working. They ran a construction business. In their early 60s, they could both wield a hammer as well as any of their younger employees. Even Maya's grand could drive a nail in with just 2 strokes. Maya's father's parents, on the other hand, tall, pale, and soft-looking, self-professed aging hippies. Nana and Pappy were artists, and the only thing their hand revealed were the colors of the paint they were using in their latest creations. They looked younger than their 60-some years, and they sounded even younger than that. So you're 16, Maya, Pappy said now. Right on, he patted her knee. Maya noticed that age spots were joining the freckles in the back of Pappy's hands. Pappy reflected the Irish part of her dad's family background. Whereas her dad had black hair, Pappy's hair was deep auburn. Because this is a special year, sweetie, Nana said. We all chipped in together to get you something, well, special. She looked at her husband and Gran and Gramps. Isn't that right? Gran nodded. She pulled a small red velvet pouch from the pocket of her gingham apron, which she hadn't removed even though she'd left the kitchen hours before. The typical Spanish-Portuguese grandparent. She held it out, and Maya took it. Because my grandma, was always constantly wearing an apron. Maya pulled out the pouch of strings, and she turned the pouch over. A thin gold chain with a delicate gold rose pendant fell from the pouch. Oh, Maya gasped. It's beautiful! Nana elbowed Pappy. Told you she'd love it. Pappy shrugged. He winked at Maya. I voted for one of those video game contraptions. Thought someone your age would want something more techy. Maya shook her head. I've had techie already, Pappy. She smiled widely as she thought about her virtual birthday party from the night before. This is perfect. Anna helped Maya put the necklace on, then hugged her sister. Happy birthday, big sis. Maya's parents and grandparents hugged Maya in return. When they were done, Maya's dad, firelight making the scalp showing through his thinning buzz cut appear to shine, got out his guitar. Maya and her parents and grandparents sang old folk songs for the next hour, until Elna said her brain needed its sleep. When Maya settled under the covers that night, listening to Elna's snores, her sister always fell asleep in seconds. Maya pressed her fingers to her forehead. The slight headache that had nagged her on and off all day was throbbing more insistently now. Was the pain related to her time in the AR booth? No, Maya thought. It was probably just a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. She was simply overtired. Maya closed her eyes. It really had been a perfect birthday. She had her big party, and her traditional party. Maya closed her eyes, relaxed into sleep.
The end.
Really?
Yeah. It just ends there, and the twist is nothing bad happens.
But we know that's not. Something's gonna happen. Star, star, star. When Maya looked back toward the end of everything, she couldn't easily pinpoint when it all started to go weirdly wrong. She remembered the first shock, of course. At the time, it didn't seem all that strange. Sad, yes, but not strange. After all, it wasn't unusual for 62-year-old women to get breast cancer, and it wasn't unusual for them to lose their battle with the disease, even after weeks of chemotherapy and radiation. Besides Grand's cancer diagnosis, nothing out of the ordinary happened in the year following Maya's 16th birthday. Oh, so this is going on for years. Things were pretty
Oh, okay.
normal, except for Maya's reoccurring headaches. The headaches, though annoying, had never been serious enough for her to tell anyone about them. Secretly, she'd wonder if the AR booth's headband had done some kind of nerve damage. However, since the booth had been closed when she used it, she didn't think she had any right to complain to anyone about it. Besides, the pain was
Mm-hmm.
low grade and intermittent. She told herself it was nothing. Maya's 17th birthday was nothing like her 16th. Although Gran tried to insist that the party go on as usual, no one was in the mood to celebrate anything. By the night before Maya's birthday, Gran was like a transparent copy of her old self, as if someone with shaky hands had tried to transfer her likeness onto flimsy tracing paper. On the night of Maya's 17th birthday, Maya wasn't sitting around the bonfire with her parents, sister, and grandparents. Instead, she and Gramps, Maya's parents, her sisters, her aunts and uncles, and her cousins clustered around Gran's bed in Gran and Grandpa's living room. Gran had insisted on passing away at home, so they turned the previously cozy and comfy room into a sick room. It was a room barely large enough to contain all the people who'd come to say goodbye to the wasted woman in the narrow bed, and it was a room not nearly big enough to contain all the love the family had for this woman who was close to taking her last breath. The room also wasn't adequate to hold the grief that was born and grew into its full stature the second Grant was gone. Later, as Maya and Elna clung to each other in Elna's bed, Maya asked, "Why Gran? Why not me and old Mr. Vance from down the street? I saw him kick his dog once. He's a jerk. Why not him?" Elna hugged Maya tighter. "It doesn't work like that. There isn't some good and bad list like Santa has. It's biology and chemistry and DNA and BS. It's BS, Elna. It's just..." Maya burst into tears. She touched the gold rose that hung from her neck. She hadn't taken off the special necklace since she'd put it on. She held it tight now, as if by holding onto it she could hold onto her Gran. Then Maya finally crawled into her own bed and tried to settle into sleep later that night. She wasn't relaxed at all. All was not well in her world. She just lost one of her favorite people on the planet. What would be next?
Predictions. I have them.
Do you want to do your
Yeah.
predictions?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Like, because early in the story, Jets was talking about like alternate worlds, basically. I don't think that's a coincidence in just implying that this is like an alternate uh, world of the Mega Pizzaplex, but I think that Maya will go to the AR booth again, just so that she can see her grandma and being happy and like dissolve into madness and either like live in that AR booth forever or just like rot away and die there and just like refuse to leave.
I think they would take her out before that happened.
And still,
The answer to Maya's question came within just a few days. Pappy was.
yeah, okay. There's a lot of cancer in this story.
Yeah, I mean, my mom is still alive. She survived her two
Yeah,
dealings with cancer, but I have my grandpa and my dad's best friend, who is like my uncle, didn't. So
yeah.
I'm gonna push through it.
Okay.
Pappy was diagnosed with cancer next. It was in his brain, and it was fast growing. He was unable to care for himself within a month of getting his diagnosis. Maya and her extended family took turns doing everything for Pappy. Before Pappy reached the end, Gramps got his diagnosis. Oh my god, is everyone just getting cancer?
You know, I think like her headaches are giving like her loved ones, everyone who was displayed in her happiest day, like the headaches that she's experiencing is like radiation, and
Yeah,
it's like
that's what I was
projecting
thinking, radiation.
out and
She's
like
just beaming
and like
radiation at everybody.
yeah, she's just radioactive and she's giving all of her loved ones cancer. Oh my god, that's horrible.
He's not gonna fight it, Maya's mother said to Maya's dad the day they got the news. Maya and her parents were at the dinner table, picking at plates of spaghetti. No one had an appetite. Maya's mother, though, stoic. Her eyes were dry. Maya, on the other hand, felt like she was drowning in tears. She had trouble breathing, too, as if a big troll had settled in her chest and was squeezing the air out of her. What was happening to her family? As Maya got ready for bed that night, Elna sat in front of the computer they shared. If it was just Gran and Gramps, Elna said, tapping a few keys, I suspect something carcinogenic in their building supplies. It's Pappy, too. Maybe his paints? Maya looked over her sister's shoulders as Elna clicked the mouse. Display shifted from an article to the words obstruction. Mm. Elna sighed dramatically. I'm going to bed, Maya said. Elna said and clicked the mouse to open a new search window. For the next several nights, Elna stayed up late, researching the causes of cancer. Maya wasn't good at research. She spent her spare time reading to her grandfathers. Puppy, of course, didn't understand her anymore, but she knew he was aware of her presence. Gramps kept telling her she should stop wasting her time catering to a dying old fart. You should be on a date, he told her several times. Maya tried to remember the last time she cared about going on a date. Just a few months before, she had a crush on a junior varsity quarterback. Now, when she looked at his carefree grin and his tousled hair, she felt annoyed. Wrapped up she was with her 6 grandparents, Maya didn't pay any attention to what was going on with anyone else. It was only after Nana got cancer and died, just days after Gramps and Pappy were gone. Yeah, all the grandparents died from cancer. Okay. It took
So
me a second to pause. She's just a
yeah,
walking beam of radiation right now.
just I don't know why, but when you said that, I thought of like that meme of the guy T-posing and chasing that guy down the hallway with like glowing red eyes. Just
Pappy
a
were gone.
walking.
Maya emerged from her grief fog enough to notice that people all around her were getting. Yeah, she's a walking radiation. Everybody's getting cancer around her. Oh my
Everyone's
god.
just she's just radiation. She's just a walking radiation. This is horrible. God.
This is why you
I
don't
don't
go into experimental AR booths when they're closed down.
I was excited because I'm like, oh, cool. We finally get a Tales of the Pizzaplex story in the Pizzaplex. It's like, no, she wants to know an AR booth becomes radiation. Everyone gets cancer and dies around her.
Oh my god.
I'm sorry for laughing.
No, like, I was upset at first, but now this is just too ridiculous.
Yeah, no, like I was upset at first too, but now it's just now it's like ridiculous levels.
Mr. and Mrs. Lambert succumbed not long after Maya's grandparents passed. I hadn't even known they'd been sick until their grown children showed up to close up and sell the house. Maya felt bad when she found out. She hadn't been over to see them since Gran had gotten sick. Weirdly, she vaguely wondered what would become of Miss Lambert's award-winning coffee cake recipe. She didn't think about that for long. Mr. and Mrs. Davis were diagnosed next, then Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. I hadn't even noticed she hadn't been asked to babysit for a while because she'd been so preoccupied with her grandparents. When she found out they were sick, she went to see the Thompsons, and she offered to help take care of the kids. Same for the Davis family, running back and forth between 2 homes, took up all her free time after school.
You know, if this was like in like another franchise or something, Because I'm just imagine like everyone in the neighborhood is like dying of cancer, and then they go full Death Note style with coming up with the conclusion that this isn't cancer, this is the work of a serial killer. We need to find who wrote the Death Note.
At school, she was barely conscious. However, she was aware enough to notice that she was hearing the word cancer far more than she should have been. My brother was admitted to the oncology ward last night. Brienne, the varsity head cheerleader, said to her crew as Maya shuffled past their table in the noisy cafeteria. We're taking care of my sister at home, Brienne's friend, Mackenzie said. I also said the oncology ward is full. Actually, there aren't any beds in the whole hospital. When people go to the ER, they park the beds in the hallway. Yeah, this is your fault, girl. Brienne had no response to that. The other girls at the table were equally unconcerned. I stopped and stared at them. Didn't notice her. Did you try that new mascara I told you about? Brienne asked from the other girls. The girl, a pretty blonde, fluttered her eyelashes. Can't you tell? Everyone at the table admired the girl's long lashes. Maya shook her head and took her tray over to the table where Jackson and Noel were already seated. Maya flopped into a plastic chair, slammed her tray on the scarred laminate top table. She gestured toward the cheerleaders' table. Can you believe them? They're acting like it's no big deal. Like what's no big deal? Noel asked. Maya frowned at her friend. All the cancer. Jackson shrugged. My mom was diagnosed last week. Maya's mouth dropped open. I'm so sorry you didn't say anything. What's to say? Jackson asked. He dug into the chili on his tray. The pungent scents of tomato and onion filled the air. Y'all want to go to the Pizzaplex this weekend? Apparently the new animatronics show is pretty incredible. Maya stared. She shifted her gaze to Noel, who was nibbling at a salad. Noel was totally relaxed. Seriously? Maya said. The word came out high-pitched and too loud. Jackson and Noel frowned at Maya. Several kids at neighboring tables turned to look at Maya with raised eyebrows. Maya lowered her voice and leaned towards her friends. Why are you acting like everything's normal? Jackson.
Okay, like. No, continue.
No, you say what you were going to say.
Oh, well, I just want to say, like, to be fair, when you're in a situation of like tragic circumstance and there's like grief and death all around you, it going out to like something like the Pizzaplex or something is actually a good thing because you need that temporary respite. You need that relief. It's just that when, not to get too personal here, but like when my dad died and like the funeral was happening and people were like coming in and out of my mother's home, and there was just like a lot of sadness and like everything around me, and it got like too overwhelming at times. My friend from out of town was visiting, and I just like, and we talked about like fandom stuff and like went to the pool and stuff, and it was just like a total release from like all the stress and grief and death that was happening at the time. So I don't necessarily think that Jats is just trying to pretend that everything's normal. I think he just like needs a stress reliever, like because you need that in like times of crisis and grief like that.
Yeah, but if everyone's getting cancer, that's suspicious, though.
Yeah, no, that is sus.
Jackson exchanged a baffled look. Jackson gazed across the table at Maya. Because everything is normal? It's fucking not, you dipshit.
Okay, forget everything I said. Jackson's just nuts.
Maya slapped her hand on the table. The thwack cut through the chaotic conversations and the tinkling cutlery sounds in the room. For a second, the sound stopped, and several heads rotated Maya's way. Maya ignored the scrutiny. She kept her voice low and steady when she spoke again. Haven't you noticed it seems like everyone's getting cancer? My Aunt Sophia was just diagnosed. My Uncle Raphael was diagnosed a month ago. And my grandparents have all died of it in the last 13 months. It's weird. Something's going on. Jackson shrugged. I hate you. Cancer sucks for sure. I hate you even more. But there's nothing weird about it.
Okay, forget everything I said about Jackson. He's just like
I am
he's just an
flipping
idiot.
off my screen right now with both hands.
Are you okay?
Just because my personal family experience with cancer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I want to punch this kid.
And yeah, like you don't make light of cancer. It's cancer, you know?
Maya opened her mouth to argue. But what was the point? She picked up her tray and stomped out of the cafeteria. She no longer wanted to hang around her with her friends. They were clueless. She couldn't stand looking at their carefree faces. Over the next few weeks, Maya saw less and less of Jackson and Noelle. Summer arrived, and her friends got jobs at the local burger joint. Time for a job. She split her time between the hospital, where she'd sit with her aunts and uncles. Aunt Louisa and Uncle Peter had cancer now, too. While they received chemo, her aunts and uncles' houses, where she would help take care of the older cousins, 4 of whom were now dying of cancer. Everyone you go near dies of cancer. Why have you
You
not?
know who they could really use right now? What was her name from the first story that shaved metal on people and healed them
Jessica.
miraculously? Yeah, they need Jessica. Bring Jessica back.
Just like shave it over Maya and cure her of whatever is causing everyone to get cancer. Then everything will be good.
Yeah. Yeah.
While they received chemo in her aunts and uncles' houses, where she would help take care of the older cousins, 4 of whom were now dying of cancer, she also still helped out the Davises and the Thompsons. Maya spent her days making food, changing sheets, emptying bedpans, and doling out medications. She spent her nights tossing and turning and listening to Elna snore. When Maya's grandparents had gotten sick, Elna had been a compatriot in Maya's need for answers. But Elna had long since stopped going to the library. When I would ask her why so many people were dying of cancer, Elna would just shrug and stick her nose back in her latest math textbook. I sometimes thought of trying to figure out what was going on herself, although she didn't like doing research, but she knew how. When did she have the time? She's too busy taking care of sick people. One afternoon in late August, just days from the start of Maya's senior year, Maya finally got a bit of good news. Favorite teacher, Miss Carpenter, had her first baby. I do not have high hopes for this baby because of the story. I feel
No.
fear. I feel fear for the child.
I fear for this baby.
Noelle stopped by to tell Maya about it. 2 girls stood in front of the washer and dryer in Maya's house. Maya's father had been sick for a month. Because her mom was focused on caring for him, Maya was now doing everything else in the house: the cooking, the cleaning, the shopping, the laundry, and paying the bills. She wasn't sure how much longer she'd be able to do that. Her dad's chemo treatment was making him really weak. How long would be able to keep working?
Okay, so like she's 18 now at this
Yeah.
point because it's like her senior year. Yeah, 18 or 17.
She's just a
Like
walking beacon of radiation that's killing everyone slowly in her entire town.
so she's been like a walking beacon of like radiation for like 3 years at this point. And
2.
everyone's just like
2, because she turned 16, now she's 17 going on 18.
yeah, and everyone is basically like sucks to suck, things happen, but like
Why isn't any, like, you'd think, like, the government would be, like, suspicious as to what's going on and would, like, send, like, some people to research, like, why is everyone just suddenly getting cancer in this one town?
Right, because, like, everyone getting cancer and, like, this one town, this one neighborhood, this, like, one community, it's not a normal thing, like, there would be, like, journalists or something, or, like, the doctors at the hospital would, like, look into it more, I would think, like, all these cancer cases, it's, like, not a normal thing.
No, not normal at all.
No.
How'd you hear? Maya asked as she and Noelle folded a sheet. My mom was in the hospital, ward at the hospital. I get bored sitting with her. I go to the nursery and look at the babies. Maya wanted to call Noelle.
Oh my god! Did Maya said that she goes to the nursery ward and look at babies?
No, her friend Noelle said that.
Oh, her sister did. Okay, oh my god.
No, her friend. Her mom is in the hospice ward of the hospital, so her mom is also in there for
Okay.
cancer.
Okay, but didn't Jatz's mom also get cancer when
The year
his mom
before.
when his mom wasn't exposed to Maya, Jatz himself was. So
But
I
here's the thing though. They
yeah.
were also inside the ER booth.
Yeah.
So all three of them are probably radioactive.
Oh my god. All the babies. No. Why am I actually crying? I'm actually upset.
I'm upset too. I hope the babies just stay okay. I hope nothing happens. I don't like this. I am truly upset.
It would be fun. Funny FNaF book meme. If it was getting cancer and dying. That's not okay.
Oh my god. This one is a triggering one, honestly. I'm just like so baffled at this point. I can't even be upset. But I am upset, but not in the way I would usually be upset like I was one time when I saw a movie.
If we split this into parts and split up the stories, like put a trigger warning at the beginning of this, because we came into this with like no idea.
Yeah, I'm definitely putting out a warning about this one. Oh my god.
All the babies are gonna get cancer.
No, there's still let's see what happens.
Okay.
Maya wanted to call Noelle out on the offhand way she talked about her mother's condition, but she also wanted to focus on something hopeful for a change. New baby was hopeful. Is she still in the hospital? Maya asked. Miss Carpenter, that is. Noelle shook her head. I think she and the baby went home. Noelle's eyes lit up. Do you want to go see them? No!
No! Stop seeing people. Like, do it like they did in the olden days where you bury yourself in a hole with no room to sit or squat to poop and just live in the hole in the ground.
I was just gonna say quarantine yourself like everyone has been from COVID.
Well, like, they quarantine themselves like indefinitely because like they don't know how to fix this. What are they gonna do? Call Freddy Fazbear? He knows what to do.
Maya nodded. She doesn't live too far from here. Let's ride our bikes. It took only 15 minutes. I'm crying and laughing at the same time. I can't help it.
I'm so astounded because like the first story was like suspenseful. The second story was kind of boring because they talk about interior design so much. This story went from like a 0 or 5 to like 11 really fast.
I don't even know if it's a good 11 at this point.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm feeling a lot of things. Oh my god.
It took only 15 minutes for Maya and Noelle to pedal the few blocks to Miss Carpenter's house. They reached a small cottage-style home just as a summer storm cloud released a downpour, and thunder rumbled across the sky. They dropped their bikes in the narrow driveway and scurried to the covered front porch. When they knocked, lightning lit up the sky behind them. Thunder sounded again just seconds later as Miss Carpenter opened the door. Yeah, that's not ominous. This is clearly not a bad sign that something's about to happen. Girls, what a nice surprise! Miss Carpenter wasn't a whole lot older than Maya and Noelle. She started teaching in Maya's sophomore year. She was a tall, slender woman with wavy brown hair and bright green eyes. She could have easily passed for a teenager, even now, standing in our entryway, holding a blanketed bundle to her shoulder. Maya craned her neck to get a glimpse of the child. Congratulations, Maya said. We came to see your baby. Maya held out a bunch of roses she'd picked from her backyard right before she and Noelle had hopped on their bikes. With everything that was going on, Maya hadn't had time to tend to her flowers, but they seemed to be taking care of themselves. The peach-colored blooms in Maya's hand were healthy and fragrant. Yeah, the thing about radiation is that they seem to really do well for flowers usually, even if sometimes they do get up mutated. But flowers tend to really flourish from radiation.
Really? Is that a real thing?
At least from I think I remembered it on a post that when I read it at one point. Hold on, let me double check. Yeah, flowers can absorb radiation.
Yeah. Do we need to put a dead baby warning in this story too? That baby is gonna die.
Hold on, we don't know for sure yet. Let's just keep reading it. I don't have high hopes,
Okay,
but I'm gonna.
let's pretend.
I feel like we're really just sun and moon right now, just being really upset about the children.
Like if like a protagonist in like a Five Nights at Freddy's story dies because they're like being a little bit selfish or like weird, I understand. It's like Goosebumps level children horror, like listen to your parents, do good things, don't be bad, or bad things will happen to you. But like a baby dying in a children's horror story is like usually just because a sibling was jealous or just for the sake of shock value. So I won't be happy if this baby dies for no reason.
We'll just have to see.
Okay,
Fingers crossed for the baby.
baby.
This entire recording is just us freaking out.
I know, but this one is so freak out worthy. I wasn't freaked out of the last two.
I
Oh,
know.
neat. This one has like all my trigger buttons.
As she held out the flowers, it suddenly occurred to Maya that she should have brought something for the baby. Oh, I'm sorry, Maya blurted. We should have brought the toy or something for her or him. Miss Carpenter backed up and motioned for the girls to come into her house. Stepped into a cramped but tidy living room. It was bright with white walls and yellow upholstered furniture. The room smelled like lemon furniture polish, and the whole house smelled like fresh brewed coffee. This surprised Maya. She'd been in her aunt's and uncle's homes after each of her younger cousins had been born. Their houses had always smelled like a mixture of dirty diapers and talc and spit up and sweet milk. It was what Maya thought of as a baby smell, a distinctive scent that seemed to come with infants. I have a feeling that the she's just disinfecting everything because she thinks it's
Like germs in the air.
yeah. Her, Miss Carpenter said. I've named her Selena. She stopped in front of a small stone fireplace. Would you like to hold her? Sure. Maya accepted the bundle Miss Carpenter offered her. When the baby close to her chest, Maya inhaled and smelled nothing. Mmm. She took another sniff. Nope. Not a single thing. That was weird. Maya shifted the baby, carefully cradling the baby's head with one hand. With the other hand, Maya pushed back the blanket that swathed the infant's face. Maya gasped. She almost dropped Miss Carpenter's baby. Miss Carpenter's baby? Question mark? Maya she was holding. It was all she could do to not thrust it back at Miss Carpenter and run screaming from the house. Oh.
What?
Swallowing hard, aware of sweat trickling down her spine, Maya looked up at Miss Carpenter. Miss Carpenter beamed at Maya and looked with pride and joy at her new daughter. Maya shifted her gaze to Noelle. No, had Noelle seen what Maya was holding? Yes. Noelle was looking right at the baby's face, but really, there was no face to look at. There was a head, yes, but the head was featureless. It looked like an unfinished, see-through doll's head. Mmm.
Hmm?
She might still be in the AR booth after all, and the booth doesn't know how to make up a non-existing person. Because you know how...
Oh, okay. Like I was confused and I'm like, Lally?
No, because like, you know how the whole theory is like every face you see in your dream is actually just someone's face that you've seen like even in glimpsing, just like passing them on
Yeah,
the street. Like your brain can't
yeah.
conjure up like a non-existent face. So
Ah.
the AR machine knows there's supposed to be a baby there, but doesn't know what to do
Hmm.
because it would be a whole new
Well,
baby.
that's the question now. Like, has she just been in the AR booth for like a few seconds and she's just thinks that she's lived 2 years of her life, or like has it have 2 years like actually passed, and like the booth never got out of the under construction phase.
We'll
But
have to
like if
see.
that
Maybe it's all just been like a few seconds and she's been in there like just having a freak out.
maybe maybe like it was under construction because like once you get into the AR experience, then like they can't get out.
And then it just becomes horror.
Right.
Well, we'll see. I'm hoping it's that and not them actually being walking things of radiation and everyone's actually dying. I'm hoping that's what the twist is going to be.
That's probably what the twist is, but we were freaking out so bad.
I am hoping for this predictable twist of it being an AR booth still.
Yeah, I know, but still, everyone like getting cancer just because of every person that she's interacted with. Like, I mean, like it's still weird.
I know, but we don't even know if that's real. That's the thing. We don't know yet.
Like if that is like the part of the AR experience, why is the AR experience like showing her this, or is it just showing her like people dying in real time as she's actually stuck in there for like a real 2 years, or has it only been like a few minutes? I don't know. The story has me asking all these questions, and I don't know. I like this one.
It causes all the conflicting emotions.
I'm having many conflicting emotions about this one. I'm rating this one a 10 so far, but it really needs to stick the landing for me.
Struggling to keep her expression composed, Maya started rocking back and forth as if she was holding a real baby. With a quavering voice, she began singing a lullaby. Noelle stopped Carpenter about feeding schedules. Maya turned away from her friend and teacher. She surreptitiously peeled back the blanket so she could see the whole of the thing in her arms. No, this wasn't a baby. She didn't know what it was, but it wasn't a baby. Smooth and limp, like a jelly-filled, lifeless rag doll. The floppy content of the baby blanket was an inert mannequin baby contained in a revolting, slick, translucent skin. Beneath the skin, the very faintest outlines of pale blue filaments extended throughout the thing's body. Mmm. They looked like veins, sort of, other than these barely perceivable strands. The thing's filling was clear as its outer covering. The summer before Maya and her friends had visited the Pizzaplex for her AR birthday celebration, Jackson had dragged Noelle and Maya to a sci-fi movie about cloning. The thing Maya held reminded her of the unfinished clones. It wasn't an infant. It was like a placeholder. For an infant. So it might be that. It might be my theory that it's just the AR booth struggling to come up with an infant because the only infants she's seen personally have been her relatives, and it can't put on her relative's baby face.
Right.
Shall I take her? Miss Carpenter said. Maya whirled around. She tried to find her voice, but she couldn't. She silently nodded and returned the flaccid, what? Being? Creature? Not baby, that was for sure. Maya handed Cecilia to her mother. Can I get you girls a snack? Miss Carpenter asked. Maya said just as Noelle said. Sure. Miss Carpenter looked from Maya to Noelle. Maya frowned at her friend. I need to get back home, Maya told Miss Carpenter. I have a lot to do. It was sweet of you to visit, Miss Carpenter said. Cecilia likes being the center of attention. Miss Carpenter looked down at Cecilia as if the baby was the cutest thing in the world. Don't you, little one? Miss Carpenter nuzzled the baby's smooth, flat, squishy face. Maya felt nauseous. We need to go. Bye, Miss Carpenter. Maya grabbed Noelle's hand and pulled her friend out of the teacher's house. The driveway outside, Maya sucked in air that smelled of ozone and damp earth. The thunderstorm had left as quickly as it had arrived. The ground was soaked. The sun's warmth was turning the wetness into steam that drifted up from the dirt and pavement like ephemeral ghosts. Maya leaned over and held her stomach. She felt dizzy and weak. Are you okay? Noelle asked. Maya strained. She shot Noelle a baffled look. Didn't you see that? See what? Cecilia? She's a cute baby. Noelle studied Maya. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, You know what? Now I just like remembered people on the Twin Animatronics Ask blog saying, "Oh, I can't wait for your reaction to this one." Is this why? Is this why? Because it plays with my emotions so much.
Maybe.
Ugh.
Star. Maya didn't have time to think much more about Miss Carpenter's baby the rest of that day. Well, that wasn't true. Even though she was busy, Maya really couldn't think of anything but Miss Carpenter's baby. Oh, Noelle's weird reaction to her. But it creeped Maya out so much, she forced herself to focus on something else every time the image of the droopy, dollish infant thing entered her mind. But she convinced herself she'd imagined the whole thing. Besides, the news she got over dinner shoved aside everything else. Her mom now had cancer. Gave Maya this news calmly as Maya's mom dished up beef stew, and her dad handed around the bread basket. Basket that contained rolls that reminded Maya of Cecilia's featureless head. Nope. Stop it, she told herself. She was not going to think about that. Maya handed the basket to Elena without taking a roll. Maya wasn't hungry anyway. She picked up her spoon and swirled it in her stew, making circular patterns in a tarragon-scented broth. Her parents were going to die. Could they sit here eating as if everything was okay? Why was Elna chatting about her upcoming college classes? Maya dropped her spoon with a clatter. Elna, stop it, she snapped. Elna froze with a baby head, no, bread roll, halfway to her mouth. She lifted her eyebrows. What's your problem? She asked Maya. How are you going to be able to go to school if Mom and Dad are gone? Maya asked. She looked from Elna to her parents. Maya's dad patted Maya's hand. Oh, don't worry, sweetie. You and Elna will be fine. I know it seems like we don't have much, but we've been saving. There's plenty of funds to get you both through school, and this house is paid for. Maya's dad returned to peacefully eating his stew, as if he'd just been discussing the day's thunderstorm. This is wonderful, hun, he said to Maya's mom, as usual. Maya's mom smiled. She picked up the bread basket and offered it to Maya. Are you sure you don't want a roll, sweetie? Maya erupted from her chair, covered her mouth, and ran from the room. She barely made it to the bathroom before she threw up. Did she have cancer now, too?
God. Like, yeah, there's like definitely like something off because like if both parents had cancer, I don't think that they would be this nonchalant about it. Like they would have to be seeing their daughters about like discussing plans for the future if the worst comes to worse and like blah 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 blah, you know.
Okay, I accidentally just skimmed ahead, and you are not gonna like this. Hold on, actually, you probably
Oh
are gonna like this.
no, the baby.
No, nothing to do with the baby. Nothing to do with the baby.
Okay. I was ready. I was like prepared to like crawl around my room and do this stims, but I did do a spin in my chair because I'm not dealing with it.
Star. No, Maya didn't have cancer. Her mom took her to the hospital the next day. Doctors ran the usual tests. Maya, unlike most of the world's population now, is fine. Basically, the entire world has cancer now. Everybody is. It's just a cancer pandemic. I have a feeling that COVID really impacted the other.
No, this was heavily inspired by the COVID pandemic. Are you kidding me? It definitely is.
Yeah, there's no way this wasn't.
Yeah, no way. It was probably like written. I'm guessing that like this was like the rough draft started in like 2020 when like everyone was trapped inside. That's what I'm thinking.
I'm part of me is wondering if they actually wrote it as COVID, but then just like changed it to cancer before publishing.
Let's just change it to cancer to not offend anyone.
Oh,
Oh my god! Hang on, I need to do a few more spins in my chair. I knocked my trash can over. All right, let's go.
Okay, hold on. Although fine wasn't the right word to describe Maya at all. There was something fine about her. Maya was a wreck. Although school had started again, it wasn't the way Maya had envisioned her senior year. For one thing, most of the regular teachers were dead or dying. Half her class was sick. Maya's favorite activity, choir, was canceled, as were most extracurricular activities. There weren't enough participants. Yeah, this was definitely exploded by COVID.
Oh my god.
And even so, no one acted as if anything was wrong. Maya had never liked watching the news. No one in our family did. We preferred talking about happy events and doing fun things than keeping up with what was going wrong with the world. But lately, Maya couldn't stop watching the news. She found
Oh
herself
yeah, this
glued.
was definitely written during COVID.
She found herself glued to the TV screen whenever she was within range of one. It's like watching a car wreck. It was horrifying, but she couldn't help herself. The news memorized her not because it was all doom and gloom, though. In fact, the news was the exact opposite of the panic that would be reasonable in the current situation. Instead of somber reports of illness and death, the newscasters provided sprightly updates on the number of people diagnosed, treated, and dying. It was like watching a ticker tape of cancer stats, all scrolling across the screen to a backdrop of upbeat instrumental music and newscasters' chirpy narration. Yeah, I remember
Yeah,
it was like that during COVID. Like they would like announce it like in the most like they didn't
yeah,
even care.
yeah. No, I remember. I remember the graphs. I still think that they do the graphs, but not as much.
Yeah.
Just because I was like when I my mom's house, I like watched a lot of news because like that's what she watched. But I don't watch much news on my own time.
Another 342,128 people died in China yesterday, Bob. Bob? What are you doing here? Get back to the Pizzaplex!
They don't know our OCs.
I know, I just felt like making the joke.
I know.
A poopy haired female news anchor announced as if giving a football score. How are things in Europe? Similar, Pam. The last count was 312,572, Bob responded. Britain has passed a mass cremation law to handle a large number of deceased. As freaky as these emotionless reports were, though, they weren't what kept Maya awake at night. Her eyes weren't glued open in the darkness because of cancer. Not even her own sick family kept her awake. No, what kept her from closing her eyes were the babies. Or really, the not babies. She couldn't stop thinking about the unfinished, vaguely baby shaped things that were now passing for newborns in the world. Yeah, AR
Yeah.
Machine is struggling to come up with new faces.
Yeah, because I'm sure that she's seen the news before and probably seen like her local newscasters or whatever, so she would know their faces, you know.
Yeah. But creating whole new faces for the new babies, it's like, can't do that. That face has already been used.
Also, that's also weird to me. Has she like never gone into a grocery store? I went to the grocery store today and I saw about like 10 babies.
No. I don't think it's her fault. I think it's the AR machine. It's not programmed to create new faces, like new people. So
Mhm.
it doesn't know what to do with like this fantasy with all these babies because like it's not like finished. It's under construction.
Also, now because like this occurred to me a while ago, but I forgot to share this thought. Um, like Jet said that the AR meshes like virtual and reality. So like, what if these things are still actually happening, but her brain is still connected to the AR machine? So she's like experiencing the AR effects in the real world.
We'll just have to wait and see. We have no
I
idea
guess
what's.
so. She's either still in the AR machine or like her brain is in the AR machine and she is actually giving everyone cancer.
Miss Carpenter's Cecilia was the first one that Maya saw, but now she knew that Cecilia wasn't an aberration. All new infants looked like Cecilia. None of the babies were normal. Worse than that, not only were they not born normal, but these new children also weren't growing normally either. A couple days after seeing Cecilia for the first time, I had gone to the pharmacy, skirting around a sidewalk under construction sign. Lot of under construction notices.
Like what? I thought that was the first one.
No, there was the under construction sign on the AR booth itself. The page under construction thing that the sister saw on the internet, and now the sidewalk under construction sign. That's
Oh,
three.
okay.
That's 3 signs now.
All right.
Skirting around a sidewalk under construction sign, Maya had spotted Miss Carpenter getting into her car. "Hi, Miss Carpenter," Maya had called. "Hi, Maya." "How's Cecilia?" Maya had asked, just to be polite. She didn't really want to know anything about the thing Miss Carpenter called her baby. "Oh, she's great," Miss Carpenter had said, and she gestured toward the passenger seat of the SUV. Looking past Miss Carpenter, Maya had glanced at the bundle she expected to see strapped into a baby carrier. What she saw in the passenger seat wasn't a baby-sized bundle. It was a child-sized, mass? So unstructured that it was little more than a vaguely human-shaped outline. The thing that Miss Carpenter called Cecilia was a drooping pile of gooey material spilling over the edges of the passenger seat. Unmoving, the child.
Fast go!
Why?
It's fast go real.
Why? Why does it keep coming back to Fascu?
Why is it always Fazgoo? Maybe everyone is Fazgoo.
But isn't
And we're
Fasgu
going-
pink? She said it was translucent.
Oh, right. Translucent. Maybe a new breed of Fazgoo.
Oh, God. Unmoving, the child thing drooped across the leather lifelessly. But it wasn't lifeless. How could it be? It had more than quadrupled in size in just 2 days. And Miss Carpenter clearly didn't think this was strange. She probably didn't think it was strange because these inert mannequin creatures were everywhere now. I couldn't go anywhere without seeing one of the nauseating things in some stage of development. Star, star, star. By Christmas, Maya's parents were ensconced in hospital beds in the family living room, with IV drips in their arms. They lay with their hands linked, watching old movies while Maya ran around trying to keep up with their care, and Elena's care. Elena was sick now too. She was the last of Maya's loved ones to get diagnosed. Jackson and Noelle were dying. Oh, so they're not radioactive because they're also dying. All Maya's cousins were dying. Mr. and Mrs. Dave on their own, and they were sick and dying. Mr. Thompson had already died, but Miss Thompson was hanging on, barely. She was dying, and now her children were sick and dying too. Everyone was dying. The jelly-filled doll.
Nothing. I'm just very, right.
Yeah.
Hug.
Hug.
Hug. Hug.
Hug. Cat hug.
Hug.
And the jelly-filled doll babies were being born right and left. Why does that bother me seeing right first?
You know what I'm thinking now? Like maybe I was right about like her brain being in the AR machine, but maybe like the AR is trying to like bleed into our world and like take over, because like these manifestations of like not memory babies are like growing and like gaining more numbers where like the world's population is dying.
In the AR world, anyway.
Yeah, in the AR world anyway. Maybe they think if they can like be strong enough, then they can like bleed over to the real world too.
Well, let's just see. Being
Okay.
born left and right, I'm not saying right and left, growing seemed faster and faster with each passing. Unsettling numbers of them had started showing up in public. They were massing in parking lots, accumulating on street corners. They didn't move around. They just lay in clumps, like mounds of humanoid-looking debris, stacking up because no one was removing it. I couldn't understand why the mounds kept getting bigger and bigger. Where were they coming from? A couple days before Christmas, Pastor Ben visited the house. Maya opened the front door hesitantly, dreading that she'd find one of the new neighbor children, aka doll things, lying on the porch. She was beyond relieved to see her minister smiling at her as if he didn't have a care in the world. Maya threw her arms around the broad-shouldered man with an unruly blonde hair. "Pastor Ben, you're still alive!" Maya hadn't been to church in months. When was there time for church? Besides, She'd seen on the news that churches had been turned into clinics for the dying. Still kicking, Pastor Ben chuckled. Apparently it's not my time. Yet. Maya looked closely at Pastor Ben, and she realized he was sick too. His skin had the same gray pallor she was seeing in everyone she knew and everyone she didn't know. He'd lost a lot of weight since she'd last seen him. He looked like a human hanger for his black shirt and slacks. His white liturgical collar, I have no idea if I said that right, was now 2 sizes too big for him. Pretending that all was well, Maya opened the door and ushered Pastor Ben into the house. She motioned toward the living room, where her parents were weakly, but gamely, singing Christmas carols. Pastor Ben smiled widely as he greeted Maya's mom and dad. What a joyful noise, he exclaimed. As if it was perfectly normal, Pastor Ben grabbed a dining room chair and pulled it up next to Maya's dad's bed. Then he joined in the singing, adding his full baritone to Maya's mom's already soprano and her dad's soprano and her dad's raspy tenor. Pastor Ben motioned to Maya, but she didn't have a single fa la 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 in her. She gave him a wan smile and said, I've got to. She ran from the room before she could finish. She was in the kitchen making a peanut butter sandwich for Elna when Pastor Ben wandered in a few minutes later. She looked at him and dropped the knife she held. What's going on, Pastor Ben? Why is everyone dying? Pastor Ben lowered himself onto the kitchen chair. It's not for us to ask why. We're given each day to live, not to question. What about those things everywhere? I asked. Pastor Brown frowned in confusion. Things? Maya gestured towards the street. The jelly people. Pastor Ben still looked lost. Maya threw up her hands, exasperated. Those things that look like dolls made out of silicone inside plastic wrap? Pastor Ben shook his head. The Lord doesn't distinguish life based on its appearance. All life is sacred. But those things are lifeless, Maya shouted. They're just... Is that peanut butter? Pastor Ben interrupted. I could use a sandwich. Seems like I never have time to eat, with all the funerals and baptisms. Maya goggled at her minister. You baptize those things? Pastor Ben smiled. It's part of my job, Maya. Maya shook her head. What more could she say? She felt like she was on a sinking ship and no one but her knew it was going down. No matter how much she ran around trying to sound the alarm, everyone continued to go about their business as if the world was as it should have been. Sighing, Maya put the sandwich she'd been making for Elena on a saucer. She handed it to Pastor Ben. He patted her hand in thanks. Lifting the sandwich, Pastor Ben said, The world is a paradox, Maya. A balance of good and bad. People are dying, yes, but life is proliferating. Not only are babies being born at an unprecedented rate, but also growing into adolescents and then adults in a matter of just days instead of years. Tragedies and miracles tend to go hand in hand. Why are they? So he's aware.
Yeah,
They're all
so like
aware.
they're all aware and they're all just like really nonchalant about it. I don't know if they all look like jelly babies to the average person or if only Maya sees them that way, but like they are at least aware of how fast that they're growing. I don't think I would call that a miracle. I would be like terrified.
No, because Pastor Ben said the Lord doesn't distinguish life based on its appearance, so they know they look like jelly people.
What's like even worse and like it's stranger, like can you imagine like being a mother, carrying a child like within you for like 9 months and then like it comes out and it looks like that, and then like within 2 days your infant is a child and then 2 more days they're like an adolescent, and you don't have time to like monitor their childhood, or you have to give them your rapt attention for a week, and by that point they're like an adult
No,
and they
from
don't
the
need
way
you.
that's been described is that these things just spawn into existence now.
They just like spawn
Like
into existence.
there's like no pregnancy. They just like there.
So like Miss Carpenter's pregnancy was like basically like the last one, basically.
Yeah, probably like a normal pregnancy because like now they're just like popping up everywhere apparently.
Okay, well, whatever. Let's go.
Maya didn't even try to argue with Pastor Ben about his use of the word babies. He was seeing what he wanted. He was seeing what wasn't there. Or maybe she was the one seeing what wasn't there. Were the jelly beings real? Yes, they had to be. Maya wasn't imaginative enough to conjure up those horrible things. For the next several days, Maya tried to find the miracles Pastor Ben had talked about. But it was hopeless. The minister was as delusional as everyone else. One night, late, after Maya had cleaned up Elena's vomit, emptied her parents' bedpans, and sung her mother, whose pain was no longer manageable, to sleep, Maya went outside to her dormant flower garden. Sitting on the little wooden bench her father had made for her years before, she stared at the brittle, bloomless stalks, tried to remember the lively colors that used to fill the yard in the summer. As soon as she tried to picture the flowers, she realized she was having trouble seeing color at all. Everything was so faded and gray now. Sick and the dying, they were hueless shells. And the new mannequin things, they were sheer vessels, filled with nothing but limpid gel, like human-shaped jellyfish. As she'd done many times since her world had started falling apart, I felt for her gold rose. She held it tightly, leaned back, and looked up at the constellations. Although the world beneath them no longer shone brightly, the stars still sparkled in the opaque expanse of the night sky. I blinked as she looked at the stars. She inhaled sharply, sat up straight. The sparkle had triggered memory, a reminder of the AR unit in the Pizzaplex. That was when it was all started going wrong, wasn't it? Finally, you put your brain to use! Maya,
Finally, she figured it out.
3 years later.
Good job, Maya. Good job. Slow clap.
Maya put a hand to her temple. The very perceptible head pain that was a daily companion had begun the morning after she was in the ER booth. But what did that pain have to do with everything else? Maya tried to remember when her gran was first diagnosed with cancer. She couldn't recall how long after her birthday was when Gran got sick. She probably didn't remember because at the time it wasn't noteworthy. Of course, it was upsetting and sad, but it wasn't in any way peculiar. What if... Maya, a weak voice called out. Maya let go her gold rose pendant, jumped up, and dashed into her house. Was it her mom or Elena? She ran first to her mom and found her asleep. She tore down the hall to her bedroom. Elena was reaching for the plastic bin on the nightstand. Maya grabbed it and positioned it under Elena's chin. She held her sister's hair while Elena threw up for the upteenth time that day. Maya chastised herself for taking the time to sit outside. She didn't have the luxury for sitting under the stars. She didn't have time to ask, what if? All Maya had time for the next day, and the next was running from one sick family member or friend to the other. She no longer bothered to go to school. There were only a few classes available anyway. Wouldn't have left the house at all if she could have helped it. She hated being out on the street. Jelly mannequins were all over now. They seemed to be multiplying faster and faster. Litter up the stores, block the sidewalks. There were knots of them everywhere that Maya had to go. How did they get where they were? Maya had never seen one of the things move. They had limbs, but the limbs didn't seem to work. They could only lie around. They didn't talk either. How could they? They didn't have mouths. They didn't have organs or blood or brains. They weren't human. They were just pretend humans. Inexplicably growing objects that never grew into anything that actually functioned. And they didn't just grow. They multiplied on their own. One day, on her way to Jackson's house, Maya nearly crashed her bike when she saw one of the transparent creatures suddenly produce a smaller transparent creature. Yeah, so they're just like spawning. Maya wasn't close enough to the things, thankfully, to see clearly what happened, but it looked like the new, lank unlife slipped out of the larger one, like an infant coming out of the birth canal. Yeah, that's horrifying. Maya clapped a hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. How was this possible? Piles of jelly beings were birthing more jelly beings? Don't you think it's bizarre? Maya asked Jackson as she sat next to his bed one afternoon, trying to get him to swallow a protein drink. Jackson's parents had died weeks before. So had his older sister. He hadn't let that bother him. I can take care of myself. We're all having to do that now, right? After he'd buried his family, he'd gone on as if everything was hunky-dory. He still read his science and philosophy books. He still danced to music blasting from his boombox. He'd gone downhill fast. Jackson managed a sip of the vanilla protein shake Maya offered him, but he immediately spit it out. The sour vanilla odor made Maya's nose twitch. Maya tried again, but Jackson weakly pushed the bottle away. What's bizarre? He asked. His briefly deep voice was barely audible, and it was scratchy, like his vocal cords were caught in brambles. All the things out there. Maya waved her hand toward the street. She turned that way. She caught a glimpse of several of the gossamer jelly creatures piled up outside the window. Jackson looked toward the window and shrugged. All experiences are valid, he coughed. Blood stained his lower lip.
I want you to know now my fidget toy is like broken in like 5 separate places.
The story's just stressing you out.
Yeah. I'm okay.
First
though.
story.
I'm fine.
The first story, fidget toy broke in one place. Third story, fidget toy broke in 5 billion places.
And I have like 5 separate little worms that I'm just like constantly breaking and putting back together.
Maya reached out and wiped Jackson's mouth. She looked at the clock. She had to go home and check on Elena. What about Jackson? He could no longer take care of himself. Neither could Noelle. Family was gone too. Maya had been racing from her house to Noelle's to Jackson's to several of her neighbors' houses for days. Only her parents, her 2 youngest cousins, and her sister were left in her own family. She moved her cousins into her own house so she could watch over them. I have to go, Maya said. Not sure my parents are going to last the rest of the day. Maya set the protein drink on Jackson's nightstand. Drink this when you can. It occurred to her that she had just talked about her parents' imminent death without crying. She figured her tear ducts had dried up. I'll be back in the morning. Maya checked Jackson's IV. She quickly replaced the bag dispensing his medication. She might have run out of tears, Maya thought, but she gained more nursing skills than she'd ever expected to have. Why are you referring to yourself in the third person, if that's supposed to be your thought? Whatever. When she started caring for all her sick friends and relatives, she could barely handle the cleaning duties without getting sick herself. Now she could wipe up puke and pee and whatever else the body needed to expel without batting an eye. On top of that, she could now give painless shots and easily switch out IV catheters. Miss Thompson had taught her how to do that. The woman got so sick she couldn't do anything at all. Maya thought back to when she used to have a dream for her future. Sometimes she thought about being a doctor. Sometimes she thought about being a biologist or a botanist. Now she didn't think about being anything. All she could do was be there for the people she loved. She had to move if she was going to be there for everyone left in her care. Maya leaned over and kissed Jackson's forehead. One of his greasy locks brushed against her cheek. Don't worry about me, Jackson rasped, but take care of your sister. Jackson's eyes fluttered. He was asleep. Maya adjusted his covers. Then she left his house. Skirting the jelly people, she cycled back home.
Ah.
Hmm?
I'm just screaming over this.
Same.
Yeah.
I still have no idea how it's going to end.
How is this going to end? Like, is this just like all a horrific dream and she's just being punished because she was spoiled and just wanted one special day on her birthday where everyone pays attention to her? I think we're all entitled to a little bit of that. We can all get a little selfish on her birthday. So what, you want everyone to pay attention to you on your birthday? That's not being selfish. That's just being normal.
She even knew she was being a little like spoiled, but she even mentioned that her usual parties were like small, so she just wanted one big one to see what it was like.
Yeah, is because if this is like all like if she's like still in the AR booth and this is like all just like a dream, I'm not really getting the chromatic justice here. Like in the second story, I understood when like what's her face died by Lally, like that made sense because she was like kind of spoiled and she just kept describing how hot everyone is and how vintage her home is and was kind of annoying. So like I kind of got it, but like this, I don't really get.
She's just needlessly suffering.
needless suffering for the sake of suffering. Anyways, continue. I need to see how this ends.
Star, star, star. By the time Maya returned to her house, she was shocked to find it nearly surrounded by mounds of the mannequin things. There were so many of them in the road, on the sidewalks, and in the alley behind the house that they seemed to be more like one organism instead of several individual sacks of translucent jelly. Maya barely managed to squeeze past the conglomeration of things to get to her front door. Inside, she slammed the door closed and bolted it, and she ran to the front window and dropped the blinds. It was only after plunging the room into total darkness that she returned to check on her parents, and she realized she wasn't hearing what she should have been hearing. For the past few days, her parents' breathing had been phlegmy and labored, inhaled as if sucking through a straw, and they exhaled in a watery rattle that Maya could barely stand to listen to. Some of their struggle to get air had been relentless. It had seemed to echo through the house, reaching Maya no matter where she was or what she was doing. But now the sound was gone. Maya switched on the lamp and crossed to her mother's side. Her mom was still, her eyes open and glazed. Maya gently closed her mother's eyes. Shifting her gaze to her dad, Maya saw that his eyes were already closed. He was just as motionless. He was gone too. Maya wanted to linger by her parents' side, but she didn't have time. She'd been gone too long. She needed to check her sister and her cousins. "I love you, Mom and Dad," she whispered. Then she ran to her parents' bedroom. Maya had put her youngest cousins in her parents' queen-size bed. She surrounded them with pillows so they couldn't fall out of the bed. Now she picked up Axel and held him close. His cheeks were no longer pudgy. He hadn't smiled in a long time, but he was still accepting milk or juice from his favorite froggy sippy cup. Maya quickly got the cup. As she urged him to drink, she checked on his sister, April, who was 5. April had always been a tornado of a child, whirling constantly because she loved to dance, warping from one activity to another. She'd never been able to stay still. Now April barely moved. Her usual perky and shiny pigtails were limp and lusterless. Maya had wanted to wash April's hair for days, but feeding April and her brother and others Maya had left to care for her took precedence. "April, Nina," Maya said. The little girl's eyes fluttered open. "Can you eat something?" Continuing to hold the sippy cup for Axel, Maya tried to hand a small container of pudding to April. April closed her eyes and screwed up her face. She shook her head. At the same time, Axel reared back from the sippy cup and threw up all over Maya's chest. Ugh. Maya quickly settled the boy in the bed and made sure he hadn't aspirated any of the vomit. She cleaned him up as best she could, then hurried to the bathroom. Pulling off her shirt, Maya washed herself off. She left the bathroom and headed toward her bedroom. Grabbing a t-shirt from the back of the door, she pulled it on. She made a face when she got a whiff of the sweat. The shirt wasn't much cleaner than the one she'd just taken off. She was out of clean clothes. She hadn't had time to do laundry in. She couldn't remember the last time. Elena, lying limply in her bed, moaned. Maya rushed to her side. Checking the IV stand, she saw that Elena's intravenous bag was empty. She was in pain. Maya reached for a new bag. That's when she realized there wasn't one. She'd forgotten to restock the supplies. She had to go back out. Star, star, star. When it had become clear the medical personnel couldn't keep up with all the sick and dying people, the government had set up chemotherapy dispensaries in every town. If you had insurance, you could just pick up the medication and administer it yourself instead of going to the chemo wards, if you're well enough to get it. Maya was the only one left in her family and in her neighborhood who was strong enough to go anywhere. Last time she'd been to the dispensary, she tried to stock up with enough for everyone she was helping. Obviously, she hadn't gotten enough. After giving Elena as much water as she'd accept and trying, unsuccessfully, to give Axel and April more food, Maya had grabbed the car keys and headed into the garage. The dispensary was too far away for a bike ride. And besides, surely people made bike rides harrowing. It wasn't that these partially formed humanoid sacks were dangerous. As far as Maya had been able to tell, the empty beings that looked like vaguely human-shaped clear water balloons were benign. They didn't have enough substance to be malevolent. Even if they were, what could they do? They couldn't move. But their existence was enough to creep out Maya. things and their very wrongness sent shivers skittering along Maya's spine, because they were so unnatural. The dull people unsettled Maya. If she stopped to think about it, Maya fully expected them to become a threat sooner or later. The sheer volume of them was chilling. How long would it be before they covered the entire surface of the planet? She made sure she didn't stop to think about that very often. In the garage, Maya started her family's minivan before she hit the garage door opener. The jelly people were heaped in the driveway. Maya didn't want to risk them spilling into the garage before she could get the van going. Maya barely waited for the garage door to clear the top of the van before she pulled it in reverse and hit the gas. Several of the eerie mannequin things were in the driveway. Well, she plowed right over them if she needed to. Maya backed hard out of the garage and hit the opener button again. Because her gaze was on the road behind her, Maya wasn't sure if any of the jelly beings slopped into her garage. She figured if they did, she'd deal with that later. When she had the van in the street, it was relatively easy to navigate through the collections of dummy sacks. Besides the mannequin things, the streets were mostly empty. Nearly everyone was either sick or at home taking care of the sick. Maya only saw a few cars as she navigated through town. The rest were parked in their driveway or tucked into their garages. Some were in parking lots, but most of the lots were empty. People were dying, but they weren't dropping dead where they stood. That was what was weird about everything. It wasn't like the zombie apocalypse or anything. There wasn't a virus or a killing chemical released by a foreign country. Signs that it was inspired by COVID again. It was cancer, and although the disease was killing people quickly, everyone had time to get to the hospital or to their home to die. That was why Maya's community now looked like a ghost town, quite literally. The all things, if you ignored their odd jelly consistency and the fact they didn't go anywhere, were uncannily similar to specters. But Maya knew they weren't ghosts. They weren't, well, they weren't anything actually. They had no heart, no emotion, they had no spirit. They were like globs of nothingness in plastic containers, like human leftovers. Maya had first seen Cecilia. The baby's head had reminded Maya of her family's dinner rolls. Now she things as more uncooked dough than a finished product of any kind. They were like batter waiting to go into the oven and get baked. Nearing the dispensary, Maya's way was blocked by a road under construction sign. That's sign number 4.
Mm.
She started to make a right turn to detour around it, but then she braked and stared at the sign. What was with all the under construction signs she'd been seeing? She's noticed. Maya frowned, her mind flipping back to other such signs, starting with the one that had been in front of the AR unit. She tapped her fingers on the steering wheel. She tried to attach meaning to how often she'd seen such signs. Her brain, however, couldn't come up with any coherent ideas. Finally, she shrugged and shook her head. She got the car moving again. Maya was able to drive the rest of the way to the dispensary without incident. There, it was a bit more challenging to avoid the aggregations of jelly things to get into the flat-roofed industrial building, but she managed it. There was only one woman left on duty behind the desk. She didn't appear much older than Maya. She might have been a college student before all this had started. And she'd probably been pretty. Now she was obviously sick herself. Her eyes were sunken, and her complexion was the color of ash. Brushing a strand of oily brown hair from her face, the woman waved Maya's attempts to fill out the right paperwork. Just take what you need. The woman's voice was barely a whisper, like tissue paper rustling in an air current. Maya didn't argue. She filled the tote bag she brought with her with as many intravenous bags of medication as she could stuff into them. Then she rushed out of the building. In the parking lot, Maya was shocked to see several piles of jelly people now ringed the outermost rows. They'd been there when she arrived, and she'd just not noticed them. Maya didn't stop to consider the question because one large pyramid of jelly people was now close to the minivan. She ran to the vehicle, threw in the tote bags, and slammed the door shut. She had the engine turned over and the van in gear just as several new jelly beings tumbled off the nearest pile and landed near the front bumper. She backed up as fast and toward out of the parking lot. Purposefully, Maya kept her gaze straight ahead. She was not going to look in the rearview mirror to see what was behind her. On her way home, Maya considered stopping by the grocery store. She filled the kitchen with canned soups, cartons of pudding, and bottles of protein drinks. She figured she should add to what she had. When she got to the store, though, the parking lot was nearly buried by the jelly things. They were everywhere, like jiggly, containerless gelatin. She couldn't face even trying to make her way through the quivering mass. Maya's street was thick with the pellucid creatures when she reached it. She gazed down the road to her house. It looked like her driveway had turned into a massive heap of jello. She looked to her right. The fan was idling in front of the Thompsons' house. Only a few of the mannequin things were lying around the two-story structure. Maya was trying to take care of the last surviving members of the family, Donnie. She figured she might as well leave the car there, run in to check on him. She could hopefully jog home behind the houses, keeping away from as many jelly people as possible. Maya pulled into the Thompsons' driveway. She quickly got out of the car, slinging her tote bags of medicine across her body. Running around behind the house, she let herself in the back door, closed it, and locked it behind her. "Donnie, it's me!" she called out. A weak groan answered her. Maya set the totes on the cluttered kitchen table. She sighed as she glanced around the dirty, neglected room. Gone were the shining services and well-ordered pans and utensils she was used to seeing in Miss Thomas's domain. The sink was piled with dishes. The granite counters were smeared with stains. Maya didn't want to think about what fluids they were. The room smelled putrid, like spoiled food. Maya tried to remember sitting in the Thompsons' kitchen eating snickerdoodles and listening to Mr. Thompson's bad knock-knock jokes. Maya could almost hear him now. "Knock knock. Who's there?" "Cancer." "Answer who?" "Cancer, see I'm busy?" That had been the last joke he told her. She'd forced herself to pretend laugh. She cried copiously when he pressed an envelope full of cash into her hand. "Take care of the kids until child services arrive?" he asked pleadingly. Maya had nodded. She didn't have the heart to tell him that child services couldn't keep up with all the orphaned kids. She'd take care of Donnie, Parker, and Aurora until the end. She reached into the fridge for a fruit cup now. Maya wondered if the memories of her happy times in this room had really been in this lifetime. It seemed like it had happened to another Maya. Maybe in one of those parallel realities Jackson used to talk about. Maya froze with one hand in the fridge. Parallel reality. Oh, you're finally figuring it out, aren't you?
She's getting it because I read the Just Nuts line. Like, was this real? Finally, we're getting somewhere.
Was this real? She returned to the what if question that had been nagging her ever since she looked up at the stars. What if this wasn't real? After all, how could it be real? Everyone dying of cancer? Streets filled with fast growing jelly beings? What if she was still in the AR booth? You probably are!
You probably are. Oh my god, we're getting somewhere.
If she was, how could she tell? She thought back to her big, augmented birthday bash, when she partied with a crowd of well-wishers. It hadn't felt virtual at all. It had seemed as real as anything else she'd ever experienced. So how did she know whether this was real? Maya grabbed the fruit cup and pulled her hand from the fridge. She closed the fridge door with a muted whump. The fridge hummed. Maya remained where she was, mesmerized by the sound, until a thud came from the back of the house. Maya jerked herself out of her trance, quickly grabbed a bag of medicine from the tote, and trotted out of the kitchen. It sounded like Donnie had fallen out of bed. She hurried to his room. Sure enough, Donnie was on the floor. "What are you doing down there, bud?" Maya asked him brightly, as if his face wasn't contorted in pain, as if his lips weren't cracked, as if he wasn't a skeletal as cadaver. Donnie mumbled something that sounded like burr, but she knew he was trying to tell her he dropped Bert, his stuffed alligator. Maya picked up the fallen, spittle-encrusted plush toy, and she effortlessly lifted what was left of the rambunctious little boy she used to play hide-and-seek with.
Monty got renamed to Bert.
"Can you eat some fruit?" she asked, holding up the fruit cup. Donnie shook his head. Maya sighed and swished out his intravenous bag. She glanced at her watch as she did. She had to get back home. Elena had been without meds for too long. and she had to try to get something in April and Axel. On the way, she checked on the Davis twins. Maya set the fruit cup on Donnie's nightstand. She tucked Bert under Donnie's lax arm. I'll be back, kiddo, she told him. He blinked up at her. His eyes shifted, as if he was realizing who she was. For a second, his face looked more animated. Weakly, he lifted a hand and pointed across the room. Maya turned and scanned the shelves that hugged the wall opposite Donnie's bed. What was he pointing at? Psst, Donnie said. Maya glanced at his face. His expression was intense. He was determined that she understood. Maya crossed the shelves, and she saw it. There was a clumsily wrapped package with her name on the shelf. With a shaking hand, she picked it up. A piece of red folded construction paper was taped to the package. She opened the paper and read, Happy Birthday, Maya. She recognized Donnie's large, crooked lettering. Maya looked back at Donnie. He was watching her with more attentiveness than she'd seen him for days. She turned to his bed and opened the package, pulling out a vase, tin can sprayed with gold and decorated with gold-painted rocks. She discovered that her tears hadn't dried up after all. It spilled from her eyes, skated down her cheeks, as she looked at Donnie's strained but eager face. This is beautiful, she exclaimed. Donnie blinked. Then he closed his eyes, satisfied. Maya realized the gift must have been sitting there since her 17th non-birthday. Probably forgotten it. Why had he remembered it now? Wiping her eyes, Maya leaned over and kissed Donnie's forehead. She held the vase against her heart, and she left the room. Back in the kitchen, Maya splashed water on her face. She grabbed her tote bags, tucking the vase in with the medicine. She glanced out the kitchen window and tensed when she saw how many more jelly people were in Thomas's front yard. She was going to have to sneak out the back door and go down the alley. She slipped into the utility room off the kitchen and gingerly cracked open the door. Maya exhaled in relief. Thompson's backyard was empty of the mannequin things. She stepped out of the house and closed and locked the door behind her. Trotting to the back of the property, she eased into the alley. She froze. Here, the way wasn't so clear. The alley was thick with the cleared skin creatures. There'd be no way to avoid them completely. They didn't form a solid mass, though. Maya figured she'd be able to weave her way around them. She took a deep breath as she took off a fast jog. 6 houses stood between the Thompsons' house and Maya's home. The first one belonged to Mr. Vance, the mean old man who kicked his dog. Maya glanced in his back window as she passed it. She nearly stumbled when she saw him watching her. He was still alive! She thought all the old people were dead. The man was probably too ornery to die, she thought, as she picked up her pace. The Davis twins were 2 doors down from her. It only took her a few seconds to get to their back fence. Unfortunately, though, the back of the Davis house was surrounded by the see-through skins. Maya's pace faltered. Should she try it? Studying the creatures around the Davis house, Maya thought she saw a path through them. But then, as she watched, the path disappeared. Things were reproducing faster and faster now, right before Maya's eyes. This was as close as she'd ever been to them when they churned out more of themselves. She could actually see their jiggling masses convulsing before ejecting new, smaller versions of themselves. They did this over and over. They were spawning. No, she couldn't risk going into Davis's house. She needed to get to Elna and her cousins sooner rather than later. Twins would have to wait. Maya picked up her pace again. Maya dodged around the horde of jelly creatures, and she ran full out to the back of her house. There, she was dismayed to see that her beloved garden was buried in gelatinous people things. There was barely enough room for her to zip past them and get in her back door. As she passed the last of the creatures before fumbling the door open, she pressed against it. The cold, oily feel of the thing's skin made her shudder. Bile rose up in the back of her throat. She swallowed it down and slammed the back door closed. She bolted it and leaned against the solid wood panels, her chest heaving. For several seconds, Maya couldn't move. Her own limbs felt as insubstantial as those of the things outside her door. A faint cry coming from her parents' room got her going again. I'm coming, she called. She couldn't tell if it was Axel or April who cried out. When she got into the room, She realized it was April. Axel was unconscious. His little fists curled tightly around the top of a dirty blanket that covered him. Maya cringed at the sight of the filth. She had to find time to wash linens and get everyone cleaned up. Rushing to April's side, Maya dropped the totes and picked up the pudding container she'd left for the little girl. It hadn't been opened, of course. April thrashed in the bed, a painful grimace on her face. Maya grabbed April and wrapped her in a hug. I'm here, Nina, I'm here. April moaned and cried out again. Maya brushed April's wet, matted hair from her clammy forehead. She rocked the child in her arms and started humming a lullaby. Maya wasn't sure how long she hummed and rocked. Quite a while, she decided, when she realized one of her arms had gone numb from supporting April's weight. Maya eased her cousin back onto the bed. Then she looked over at Axel. Axel's fists were no longer clenched. His little hands were slack. So was his face. He was gone. Maya closed her eyes, waiting for the tears to flow again. They didn't come. Maybe she'd used up her reserves when she'd seen Donnie's gift. Shutting her eyes, Maya leaned over and kissed Axel's already cooling skin. Goodbye, my sweet boy, she whispered. Her spirit as numb as her arm, Maya stood. She turned and left her parents' bedroom. Straightening her shoulders, she headed down the hall to check on Elena. She'd be gone too. Would it be so bad if she was? Just outside her door, Maya sank to the floor. She closed her eyes and let her head fall back against the wall with a thunk. She barely felt the impact. She couldn't do any more. Who was she kidding? There's no way she'd keep up trying to feed and medicate the people that were left for her to care for. What's the point? Everyone was going to die. Everyone but Maya. Maya opened her eyes. Why wasn't she getting sick? Why did it seem to be happening to everyone around her? It was as if she was at the focal point of everything, just like she had been at her big birthday party. Maybe she was still in the AR unit. Maya touched her forehead, where the faint pain was still discernible. She'd been far too busy to pay attention to it, but it was there. Was it there because the headband was still in place? Maya shook her head. No, this was all just too intense to be part of some kind of computer-generated scenario. But why was it happening? Had the AR booth somehow augmented the whole world? Or had she jumped into a parallel universe? Maya sighed. She didn't know enough to answer these questions. Probably no one did. Maya stood. She had to stop feeling sorry for herself. She still needed to check on Elena. Even if Elena was going to die, she deserved as much comfort as Maya could offer until then. Maya glanced at the bedroom window as she crossed into Elena's bed, and she wished she hadn't. Just in the time she'd spent in the hallway, the jelly beings outside her house had multiplied alarmingly. A mountain of them was pressing against the house, as if trying to merge with the dwelling. Maya stared at the fragile glass covering the window. Maybe the threat she'd felt hiding along with the jelly creatures had finally arrived. But what could she do about it? Maya decided to play ostrich. Out of sight, out of mind. She turned her back to the window and went to her sister's side. Anna was so still that Maya thought she was gone. She felt her sister's fragile wrist. No, Anna was alive. Barely. A faint pulse fluttered against her thin skin. Without looking at the window, Maya reached into one of the tote bags and pulled out a bag of medicine. She hooked it up and checked the rate of the drip. She wasn't sure why she was bothering. Elena was obviously unconscious. She would probably pass away without waking up. But Maya needed to feel like she was doing something. Maya was starting to lie down in the bed next to her sister when the window behind her shattered. Maya spun around as a series of loud cracks and clatters sounded throughout the house. She screamed. Jelly beings were no longer pressing against the house. They were pouring into the house through the broken windows, sloshing through the jagged opening like a transparent octopus with an infinite number of legs. The aggregation of viscous humanoids was more liquid than solid. They flowed into the rooms as if they were a ghastly jellyfish-filled tsunami surging up onto the beach. Maya whirled toward Elna. She bent over to lift her sister, but she realized immediately that Elna was no longer breathing. Her hardly there pulse was gone. Maya didn't want to leave her sister's body in the room. When something slick started to encircle Maya's ankle, she couldn't think anymore. All she could do was react. She turned and ran from the room, railing down the hall. Maya careened around the corner toward the kitchen. She didn't have a solid plan in her head. Some part of her mind thought that if she could get to the garage, she would be safe. The garage had no windows. Both the garage door and the main door were thick and strong. How long could she hold out in there? She didn't think that far ahead. All she wanted to do now was get away from the squishy mash of gel humanoids. She always thought that things were mindless, but now she wondered. Did they have intention? If they did, what did they want? Maya glanced into the kitchen. She gasped. The kitchen was filled with creatures. She looked to her left. So was the living room. All the windows in the house were shattered. The front door had been smashed open. All things were tumbling toward her from all directions. Even though each individual jelly thing didn't take an action on its own, except to push out more jelly things, the congregation of them created movement. They were like specks of dirt. One of them might be harmless. But combined together, they had enough weight and force to bury her if they cascaded over her. The things did have an intention. It was a communal one. It didn't appear to be a good one. They were slowly but surely surrounding her. Maya lunged for the door leading out to the garage. She flung it open and leaped into the darkness before slamming the door closed behind her. Instantly, she realized her mistake. When she left the house earlier, she hadn't closed the garage door fast enough. Some of the creatures had obviously fallen in before the door had come down. Maya was overtaken by a squishy, cold, slimy mass. The sensation was disgusting. It felt like she'd thrown herself into a bowl of sticky rice noodles. Jelly beings filled the garage. Now they incorporated Maya as if she was an essential, missing part of their collective. They entwined around her, merging with her, smothering her. Seeking comfort and strength, Maya groped for her gold rose. When she found it, she clenched her fists around it, trying to fill herself with the love it represented. It was a magic rose, like ruby shoes that could transport her back to. Maya's mouth and nose filled with the malleable mush of the creatures that embraced her. She struggled to get air, expecting each breath to be her last. But her last breath didn't come. The spongy, ever-expanding weight brigand above her, and it felt like her body wouldn't be able to take the pressure any longer. But it did. Maya couldn't see anything. She couldn't hear or smell anything. She'd gone beyond feeling, too. All she was aware of was the force above her. Even that was becoming too much for her mind to comprehend. Why wasn't she dead yet? When would this be over? Maya tried to inhale and couldn't. Hopefully this would end soon. Or would it?
That was it? That was it? She just becomes jelly, people! And nothing gets resolved!
I guess it's just trying to say she's still in the ER booth because she didn't die. And now she's just like trapped in a virtual consciousness or whatever the hell.
I guess. I guess. What? Before we read the epilogue, I need to see what the wiki says. What's this story called again?
Under construction. What the fuck happened?
I don't know. She just wanted a special day. She got her special day. She gives everyone radiation and cancer, and like the AR, she was still in the VR booth, and there's like jelly people, and then the jelly people consume her and she becomes jelly people. I don't know if I'm okay after this. This story is a tragedy more than any other Five Nights at Freddy's stories I've seen. And it's like weird in an outrageous degree, and like I don't want to say a campy way. I don't even know the word for it. Oh, great. There's no trivia on this one. Thanks, Wiki.
I don't understand what. I'm just thinking she's in the AR booth this entire time, and she's now in a coma because the thing like fried her brain or something, and that's why it feels like she's not dying.
Maybe all she's eating at the hospital in her comatose state is jelly pudding.
They can't feed you when you're comatose, though. They just give you IV fluids.
Oh yeah, no, you're right. Maybe she's smelling the jello. I don't know. But she says like the jelly people are scentless.
I'm just going with the AR booth zapped her brain, and she's been in a coma this entire time. That's the only thing that will make this make any sense at all.
Maybe they'll wrap things up in the epilogue, because right now I'm trying to piece together how all three of these stories connect. I can get the hospital connection with the first story and the third story. The second story, I don't know, even though it's like the main title story of this book.
I don't think they all connect with each other, because from what I understand with the Fazbear Fright series, some stories from one book will connect with one from another that was later down the line.
Okay, yeah, so that might be a thing. Maybe they'll have a Lally's Game Part 2, Joy, and like we'll get to see what's his face and his new wife, and then she dies or something. I don't know.
Anyway, let's see what the epilogue has in store.
Okay, like this story was like way too intense for its own good. I want to say for like like the audience of 12 and up, it's like too intense. But I don't think it's too intense with like our current climate right now, because kids are watching people like die all around them at this point. So I don't know what the target demographic would think of this. Would they be disturbed or fascinated by this story? Like, like anyone watching this, like if you're 12 and up, like teenager age, like let me know what you think of this. I am genuinely curious.
I'm just confused.
I'm just, it was like so intense for like no reason, and nothing gets resolved, and she's punished for just wanting one special birthday.